Sign this, Mom." He pressed a ballpoint into my fingers with the engine still idling, exhaust curling white ribbons into the late afternoon air. The paper sat on the dashboard like a loaded pistol, neat blue tabs showing me where to put my name, where to surrender it. Above us the sign read Maplewood Care Center, in cheerful serif letters, as if a font could soften an exile. "It's just paperwork," Daniel said. "Medical authorization, HIPAA stuff, so the nurses can talk to me." I stared at the line reserved for durable power of attorney and saw the ghost of my husband's handwriting across a different page 29 years earlier, the deed we sealed with coffee stains and a handshake, because that's how simple we believed the world was. I saw my son at 6, asleep beneath a blanket covered in rocket ships in the house that was still my house. I saw him at 16, slamming the same front door. I saw him now at 32, sharp haircut, steel watch, a wedding band that had appeared with alarming speed, and a woman named Lena who smelled like expensive citrus, who always called me Ruth instead of Mom. "Sign," he said again, softer this time, like maybe if he lowered his voice it would hurt less. "Please, I have a meeting." There are moments in a life when the air changes pressure. I felt it then, the drop you get right before a storm tears open. Somewhere inside Maplewood, a TV was playing a game show with canned laughter. Beyond the parking lot, elms made a black lace of branches against the sky. "You told me this was temporary," I said. "1 week until you and Lena figure things out." He didn't look at me. "It is, of course it is, but they need this, it's standard." He had always been handsome, even when he was little. A face that made teachers bend down to his desk with extra smiles, that made salespeople lean over counters with promotions. I'd worked double shifts at the diner so that face could go to soccer practice and summer camp, so the boy behind it could have a chance to climb a life I couldn't. When his father died and the house payments weighed like wet wool, I'd written his homework checks in the same hand that scrawled tips to the babysitter, rounded, hopeful letters that believed sacrifice had a return policy. "Where's Lena?" I asked. "Busy." He checked his watch. "Can we—" "Mom, please." I set the pen down. "It says durable, Daniel." "So?" "So that's forever." He laughed, and it was the worst sound I had ever heard him make because it was so small. "No, that's just the legal word. Look, I had the paralegal at work put those tabs on. All you have to do is sign where it's blue. Think of it like insurance." Like a parachute, I thought, but he'd already pushed me out of the plane. I looked back at Maplewood. A woman in pink scrubs wheeled a man with a plaid blanket over his knees toward a door that sucked open, then shut with a rubbery thud. The smell from the lobby drifted on the breeze. Lemon cleaner, something metallic beneath it, like a penny held too long in your mouth. I had ironed my best blouse for this. The collar scratched the tender place at my throat where grief lives. 2 photographs were in my purse. One of Daniel at 10 with a gap-toothed grin, his arm around the dog we rescued from the shelter. One of the house last winter, snow on the stoop, my breath making clouds. I didn't bring a third, me, because there wasn't a recent one I liked. "Do you remember the maple in the front yard?" I asked. "How your father and I planted it when we moved in. You were a baby. You were wrapped in that yellow blanket with ducks on it." He softened for exactly 1 second, and then the meaning returned to his eyes. "Mom, please." When he said please, what he meant was hurry. I signed. My name looked like a stranger's. The pen tore a little frieze of paper at the end of the "un" in Alvarez, and I smoothed it gently, as if injuries to documents could be soothed the way I used to soothe scraped knees. Daniel gathered the pages, flipped, checked, as deft with paper as he had become with reasons. "Good," he said. "Great. Let's get you settled." He parked by the red curb and came around to open my door as if he were gallant, as if pretending a courtesy might erase the cruelty. He lifted my suitcase from the back seat, and I clutched my purse too tightly, feeling the outline of the house key taped inside the lining. Habit. I hadn't told him I had made a copy years ago after he, accidentally, took my ring of keys to work and didn't return them for 3 days. Mothers learn to make small private arrangements for the day their sons become. Inside, the lobby was a diorama of good intentions. A puzzle half finished on a coffee table. A whiteboard with the day's activities in round bubble letters. Bingo at 3. Music hour with Janet. Dinner, meatloaf and mash. A woman behind the desk smiled at me with the kind of smile people save for strangers whose stories they hope are better than they look. "Admissions?" she asked. "Just dropping my mother off," Daniel said before I could speak. The words landed like a slap. Just dropping, as if I were dry cleaning. The woman nodded politely. "Name?" I answered so I wouldn't hear the way he'd say it. "Ruth Alvarez." "Wonderful," she said, and typed, teeth catching her lip, the way young people do when they want to look like they care. "We've been expecting you." Expecting me. The phrase sent a trickle of cold along my spine. Expecting meant arrangements. Arrangements meant planning. Planning meant this had been decided somewhere that did not include me. They led us down a corridor with art prints of lighthouses. The floors shone. Our shoes squeaked. From a doorway, a woman watched me pass with eyes like mine, alert and small. She lifted her hand as if to wave, and then thought better of it. I wanted to go into her room and shut the door and pretend we were girls in a boarding school, trading secrets across twin beds. My age was a number I wore like a coat that didn't fit, too heavy, too public. The room they called mine had a window overlooking a strip of lawn, a bed with a cheerful quilt, a dresser, a closet that could hold 2 seasons of clothes if you were good at folding. A corkboard waited on the wall for photographs. Someone had left a vase of fake daisies on the nightstand. The effort of brightness broke my heart. "It's nice," Daniel said, setting my suitcase by the dresser. "See, it's not, this isn't," he faltered, and for a second I saw the child who used to shove words in his pocket like rocks, saving them to sort later. "Not abandonment?" I supplied. He rubbed his temple. "Mom, come on." The nurse arrived with a clipboard and a pen fat with advertising for a pharmaceutical company. "I'm Janelle," she said. "We're so happy to have you, Miss Alvarez. You're going to love it here. We're a family." Family. The words sat in the room like a dare. "Vitals," she said, all business now, and wrapped a cuff around my arm. The Velcro crackled. I watched Daniel watch his phone, watched his thumb scroll, watched him pretend that if he didn't look at me, I would stop being visible. "Blood pressure's a little high," Janelle chirped, reading the machine, "but that'll come down. Big day." "We should talk about billing," Daniel said to her, pulling a folder from the messenger bag he used to carry like an accessory, but now clutched like a life preserver. "Everything's in here. Automatic debits. The house will—" He stopped. "The house will what?" I asked. He smiled, and it was the practiced smile he used for waiters and neighbors, the one that promised generosity he never delivered. "Don't worry about any of that," he said. "You focus on settling in. I'll handle the rest." I thought of the blue tabs. I thought of the signature that wasn't mine when it left my hand. When Janelle finished, she asked if I had any questions. I wanted to ask if we could rearrange the furniture so that the bed faced the door. I wanted to ask if lights stayed on in storms. I wanted to ask if anyone ever got out. Instead, I asked where the library was. It surprised her. "End of the hall," she said. "We've got a cart of new donations. You read?" I nodded. Books have always been the cheapest way to leave a room. "Great," she said. "And hey, Sunday afternoons the volunteer attorney comes for the clinic. If you need to talk about anything, he's nice." "Volunteer attorney?" I repeated. "Legal aid stuff," she said. "Advance directives, wills, tenant issues. You'd be surprised how many families need a neutral person to explain things." I looked at Daniel's folder, at the neat stack he kept arranging and rearranging like a nervous tick. "Surprise me," I thought. "Please." He cleared his throat. "I should go," he said. "Traffic." Traffic had been his excuse since he learned to drive. I wondered if he remembered the night he called me from a payphone in the rain because his Honda wouldn't start outside the bowling alley. I'd driven in slippers. He'd thrown his arms around me like I was an ambulance that had figured out how to love. "You'll come tomorrow," I said. "Of course," he lied. Janelle's ager beeped. She gave me one of those soft, practiced looks nurses learn so they don't drown. "I'll give you 2 a minute," she said, and left. When the door clicked shut, the room changed shape. We were two people in a box we had built with choices. Some small, some enormous, most of them mine. He stood near the window, staring at the lawn. The sun made a rectangle on the floor with the crisp edges of a photograph. If I had a camera, I would have taken it. That angle, that light, the almost grown boy I once knew, superimposed on the man I didn't. "Do you remember the maple?" I asked again, because apparently I had run out of new words. He sighed. "Mom, do you remember the day we planted it?" He kept looking outside. "I remember the day I told you I wanted to leave this town, and you told me we couldn't afford out-of-state tuition." What else was I supposed to say? "Yes," he said, and turned, and there it was, the wound he had been polishing into a weapon for years. "You were supposed to say yes." I swallowed. "We did the best we could." He put the strap of his bag across his shoulder. "You did the best you could," he said. "I'm doing the best I can." There were 100 things I might have said then. The math of overtime, the receipts of sacrifice, the ledger of love. But I recognized futility when I tasted it. It tastes like old pennies and lemon cleaner. When he kissed my cheek, his lips were cool. "I'll call," he said. "I love you." "I know," I replied, because even liars deserve a place to stash their dignity. He hesitated at the door, then left. The sound of his shoes faded. The hall filled with the particular music of places like this. Wheels, whispers, a cough that tried to be polite. I stood in the middle of my new room and tried to make a shape of it that didn't look like defeat. I unpacked slowly. 2 sweaters, a stack of paperbacks with creased spines, the photographs. I pinned the one of Daniel and the dog to the corkboard with the pushpin provided for the purpose of hope. The house picture I tucked into the frame behind the mirror, like a secret prayer. When I opened the suitcase's inner pocket, I found the envelope I'd put there against the day I might need to remember what was true. A photocopy of the deed with my name on it, a copy of the mortgage fully paid, the tax statement with the numbers I can still recite like hymns. I slid the papers under the lining of my top dresser drawer. I do not know why, but it felt like laying a foundation. At the end of the hall, the library was a bright rectangle smelling of paper and polished wood. A man in a gray cardigan snored softly in an armchair. On the bulletin board, alongside flyers for chair yoga and a watercolor class, there was a notice printed on blue paper. Legal Aid Clinic, Sundays, 2-4 p.m. Attorney Marcus Liu. Elder Law, Housing, Consumer. I read it 3 times, as if the name might rearrange itself into a message. My reflection in the glass of the bulletin board looked steady, like a person who had been holding very still for a very long time. "Good one," said a voice behind me. I turned. A woman stood by the returns cart, white hair like a halo gone slightly crooked. She wore a sweatshirt with a cardinal on it and jeans that had been hemmed by a careful hand. Her eyes were that bright blue you only get after a lifetime of insisting on being seen. "Marcus," she said, tapping the paper. "He's a sweetheart. Got my granddaughter out of a payday loan mess last year. Volunteers because his grandmother was here before she died. That boy shows up." "That's rare," I said. My voice sounded better in this room, more mine. She held out her hand. "Evelyn." "Ruth," I said, and her palm was dry and warm as flour. "You knew," she said, more than asked. "Today." She nodded and looked at me the way nurses do when they try not to drown, but there was something else in it too. Comradeship, maybe. "Come to bingo," she said. "You can win lotions and chocolate you don't need. Plus, it keeps the mind sharp." "My mind's a knife," I said, surprising both of us. "Good," she said. "You'll need it." I picked a book from the cart without looking at the title. Words are words. The first chapter is always a door out. I carried it to the window and studied the world beyond the glass. A young man crossed the parking lot with a bouquet of supermarket flowers. A daughter, maybe. A niece. There were as many reasons to appear as there were people, and the trick was to stop counting. Somewhere on the highway, my son merged into traffic, relieved, late for a meeting at which he would probably describe himself as a self-starter who learned resilience from a working-class childhood. He would not mention the lemon smell, or the way the door clicked, or the shape of the room his mother stood in, which was now a fact in the world. I opened the book. My hands, traitors to my pride, trembled. The first sentence didn't matter, but it mattered to treat it like it did. After a page, the trembling stopped. Dinner was at 5. Meatloaf the color of a bruise, mashed potatoes that surrendered without a fight. I ate all of it. Hunger is a discipline. Evelyn talked about the cardinal that tapped on her window every morning at 7. A man named Mr. Whitaker told a joke about hospital gowns and dignity. Janelle refilled my water and said, "Tomorrow we'll show you the garden." The word garden did something to my breathing. Before bed, I stood at the corkboard and repinned the photo of Daniel and the dog, higher, as if elevation could improve either memory or sight lines. I touched his childhood face. A single moth beat itself stupid against the ceiling light. I turned the lamp off, lay down on the bed with the cheerful quilt, and listened to the building settle. Pipes sighed. Somewhere a radio played something old. I thought of signatures, of what they sign away, yes, but also of what they sign you into, the club of people who have been underestimated. I felt the press of the key in my purse lining against the chair where I had hung it. I thought of Sundays between 2 and 4, of blue paper and a name. When sleep tugged, I let it. In the falling, I saw the maple tree in my yard, our yard, gold as a crown in October, roots sunk into the kind of soil that remembers who tended it. The wind came up. Leaves lifted, bright and numerous, like small brave flags. I have loved a boy and a house with the same stubborn devotion. One of them learned to walk away. The other stays where you plant it. Morning would come. Forms would multiply like rabbits. But tonight, in a borrowed room, I made a quiet, private promise, the kind you tell no one and then keep. I would learn the rules of this new game. I would gather my papers, gather my breath, gather whatever was still mine. And one day, very soon, a door would open in the place everyone believes doors only close. I closed my eyes and for the first time all day, smiled. Not because any of this was okay, because I had finally remembered the one fact that had somehow survived exhaustion and lemon cleaner and blue tabs. A signature can be a surrender, but it can also be a start. The first morning at Maplewood tasted like paper cups and toothpaste. Somewhere down the hall, someone's radio hummed a hymn I half knew from my childhood. Somewhere else, a cart rattled like cutlery in a drawer. I made my bed with hospital corners because there are days you need a rectangle of perfection to stand on. When I opened the blinds, the lawn was slick with dew, the grass so green it insulted the idea that anything could be wrong. Evelyn knocked once and came in like she'd lived in my room her whole life. "Coffee in the lounge," she said, wagging a wrist heavy with charm bracelet memories. "It's not good, but it's hot." "I've swallowed worse," I said, and followed her. She walked the hallway with the authority of a mayor. People greeted her by name. She introduced me in the way queens introduce dukes. "This is Ruth," she told a man who was folding and refolding a napkin at the doorway of his room. "She reads. She's got a knife for a mind." He glanced up, and for a second his eyes cleared. He smiled like he remembered being a person who could admire a clever woman. In the lounge, a television chirped about a contest for the world's best catfish recipe. The coffee tasted like burned almonds. I drank it anyway. "What day is the legal clinic?" I asked. "Sunday at 2, she said. "Marcus, you'll like him." "Do you?" I asked. She made a face like she was tasting jam. "He's earnest, not in the annoying way, in the useful way. His grandmother died in 212. He keeps her picture in his appointment book like a priest." She eyed me. "You're going to ask him for help." "I'm going to ask him for clarity," I said. Same difference. Janelle found us there and put her cool fingers on my wrist like she was a tailor measuring a sleeve. "How'd you sleep?" "Well enough," I said. "Do you keep copies of admissions paperwork in a chart?" "We do," she said. "Would you like to review yours?" "I would," I said, and used my polite voice, the one I learned from women who kept towns running while men gave speeches. She walked me back to my room and handed me a slim folder with a sticky note flagging the places I'd already signed. The duplicate of the durable power of attorney winked up at me like something that had gotten away with a prank. Bubbles of legal language. My name printed beneath my signature. Daniel's name above the line labeled agent. I read the paragraph twice that said revocation, like a password you can give a guard if you remember it in time. My stomach tightened, then loosened, the way it does when you realize the animal in the bushes is a rabbit and not a snake. "Can I have a copy of this?" I asked. "Of course," Janelle said. "We can make you a whole set. A lot of folks like to keep things in their room." "I like to keep what's mine," I said. By 10, the copies were in my drawer under the cheerful socks my sister-in-law sends every Christmas. By 10:30, I had written a list on a legal pad borrowed from the nurse's station. County recorder, bank, insurance, realtor. I didn't yet know what I'd say to each, so I wrote, ask, 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 ask. Sometimes the act of making a list is the act of becoming a person again. When Daniel called at noon, my hands didn't shake when I picked up. The phone on the nightstand is the color of beige excuses. The ring sounds like a shrug. "Hey, Mom," he said, brisk, like I was a box he needed to check. "How are you settling in?" "Fine," I said. "They have meatloaf that doesn't hold a grudge." He laughed, tentative. "That's good. Listen, the stager comes at 2. I'll be out of your hair after that." "The stager?" I repeated. "For the house," he said, as if I might confuse the only house I've ever owned with a stage for balloons. "To make it photo-ready. The market's hot. It's a good time to—" He stopped just short of the word sell. "Do you need anything? I can bring you a sweater later." "What color did you pick for the walls?" I asked. "Your father always said buyers like a nice boring beige." "Grayish," he said. Never mind. Lena's got a Pinterest. It's going to look great." "Are you staging the maple?" I asked. "Mom," he said, and a warning entered his voice like rain entering a boot. "Don't make this harder." "I'm asking questions," I said. "Ask your agent if she prefers hardwood or emotional devastation." He made the noise he makes when he thinks he's being patient. "I've got to jump. We'll talk later." "Daniel," I said, "what's the listing price?" He hesitated. I could hear traffic through his car window, the sigh of the day moving past people with errands. $7.95, he said. "Comps are great." "Of course they are," I said, and laid the phone back in its cradle like a newborn who didn't ask to be born. I sat for a minute, breathed until the blood in my ears calmed down. Then I added realtor, name plus number, to my list, and below that, neighbor, Mrs. Klein, because she had lived across the street for 28 years and knew the business of every roof for 6 blocks. I dialed her from the beige phone out of habit before remembering she'd long ago given up landlines. Evelyn appeared in my doorway with a pastry wrapped in a napkin like a contraband jewel. "Stolen," she said, "from the volunteer table. Eat it before Janet from music hour smells frosting." I tore it in half and handed her the larger piece. "Do you have a smartphone?" I asked. "I have a brilliant granddaughter," she said. "Why?" "I need eyes," I said. "On a tree, on a front yard, on whether a sign appears." She grinned. "Oh, honey," she said, "you need a neighborhood watch." At lunch, she asked around. The world is run by women who know who to ask. Before dessert, a resident's daughter had texted a resident's son, who texted a high school classmate who still lived on our street, who walked his dog past my house, just as a man in a polo shirt hammered a metal stake into my front lawn. The picture arrived on Evelyn's phone after bingo, fuzzy and perfect. A white rectangle against our green. For sale, in red a little too cheerful for a gallows. Evelyn slid the phone across the table. "Consider yourself notified," she said. "And consider you're thanked," I said, and took a picture of her picture with the facility tablet Janelle lets us use for Skype calls and recipes. Technology is a relay race now. One woman carries the baton, passes it to the next. In the afternoon, I went to the garden because I needed to see something rooted that wasn't for sale. There is a small plot behind the south wing with raised beds and a bench where the paint peels with dignity. Tomatoes the size of children's fists. Basil that makes the air smell Italian. A lone sunflower that has somehow made itself taller than the fence. I sat and let a breeze read my face like a sympathetic aunt. A cardinal landed on the fence post, the color of a heart drawn by a child. The bird regarded me, ticked once, and flew to the maple that casts half the garden in grace. If I closed my eyes, I could nearly pretend the maples were the same tree. They weren't, but the rustle was similar, and for a moment I felt the old rhythm of my yard. Newspaper slap, neighbor's dog bark, that particular metallic thunk of our mail slot surrendering another bill or letter. A life is a series of noises you get used to. On Sunday, I ironed a shirt as if I were going to church. The clinic began at 2. By 1:58, the library had transformed into a waiting room for hope. A line of residents in chairs with arms, a handful of adult children with folders, and the wary eyes of people who suspect the rules might be different in this room. There was a card table near the window with a sign-in sheet and a pitcher of water sweating onto a paper doily. Next to the sign-in sheet, a photograph of an old woman in a red dress. The caption on the back would later tell me, Nai, 1931, 2022. Marcus was younger than I'd expected. Not a boy, but young enough to be the age I still see when I say the word son. Black hair, clean part. Shirt sleeves rolled just enough to show he'd do the work. When he looked up and smiled, it reached his eyes with no detours. I've learned to trust smiles that don't arrive tired. "Ms. Alvarez," he said when it was my turn, "come on back." He had made an office of the corner by the Atlas shelf. 2 folding chairs, a legal pad, a black pen he clearly loved. He wore the kind of watch men buy when they tell themselves they're not watching time, just keeping company with it. "What brings you in?" he asked. "Paperwork that pretended to be mercy," I said. I handed him the copy of the Durable Power of Attorney and watched him read. He reads like a man who listens for a living. It's rare. "How long ago did you sign?" he asked. "Wednesday," I said, in a car with the engine still running. He looked at me over the page. "Did anyone explain this to you?" "My son said it was HIPAA. The nurse at admissions said, 'We've been expecting you.'" He nodded. "So, not really." "Is it too late?" I asked. I hadn't meant to ask it out loud. It came anyway, the way the truest questions do. "No," he said. "If you're competent, and you are, you can revoke a financial power of attorney at any time. We'll draft a revocation today. You'll sign it. We'll make copies. Tomorrow, you'll take it to the county recorder and record it. You'll also send copies to your bank, any financial institutions, and anyone you think your son might approach, realtors, title companies. We'll send him one by certified mail. He'll be on notice." "That's a lot of errands for a woman who doesn't have a car," I said. He smiled. "I'll draft the letters and arrange for a notary to come here. I can record it for you if you sign a simple authorization. I'm allowed to file for clients who can't travel. If there's a charge, my office covers it. If the recorder needs you present, we'll find a way." He tapped the paper. "Important thing is, you say what you mean now, on the record." "What if he's already moved?" I said. "With the house." "Has a deed been recorded?" he asked. "Have you received anything from a title company? Did you sign a deed?" "I signed this," I said, and pressed my finger to the paragraph that had irritated me since Friday. "I didn't sign a deed. My name is on the deed in my dresser drawer."
"Good," he said, and it wasn't the empty good people hand out like breath mints. Most title companies won't close a sale with a POA unless they're very sure the principal consented. Some will, some won't, but the revocation makes it a steeper hill to climb. "I got a photo," I said. "There's a for sale sign on my lawn." "Then we'll include the listing agent on the notice," he said, already writing. "We'll advise them that any attempt to transfer without your direct participation is disputed. They like clean deals. We'll make this messy." I liked him then, for the polite savagery of that. Some wars are won by making things sufficiently inconvenient. He slid a blank form toward me, the words "Notice of Revocation" crisp at the top. "Read this. Change what you don't like. This is your voice," he said. I read. It said plainly that I revoked any and all powers previously granted to Daniel Alvarez under the instrument dated Wednesday. It said he no longer had authority to act for me. It said, in the carefully chosen sentence of lawyers, that anyone relying on that document after notice did so at their own risk. "That last line is the teeth," Marcus said. "People like not having bites taken out of them." "Leave them," I said, and took the pen. I signed my name without tearing the paper. He had a portable scanner that made the sound of a zipper mouth. He made copies. He opened a file folder and slid the original inside like a relic. "One more thing," he said, and handed me another sheet. "A simple letter to your son. You can say anything you like. I drafted the polite version." I read, "Daniel, I have revoked the power of attorney you asked me to sign. As of today, you are no longer authorized to act on my behalf. Any decisions about my property and finances must be made by me directly. Please direct all questions to my attorney, Marcus Liu. I wish you well." I handed it back. "Take out the last sentence," I said. He did. He didn't smile. A notary arrived like a magician making a rabbit plausible. She checked my ID, compared my signature to the one on the license, issued the year after Miguel died, when I decided my hair would henceforth be its own weather. I signed. She stamped. The sound of the stamp was a small thunder I felt in my ribs. "Tomorrow," Marcus said, "I'll file this with the recorder. By midweek, the index will show the revocation attached to your name. I'll email the realtor today. I'll send certified mail to your son. If he calls you, don't engage. Let me be the bad guy." "I've raised a lifetime of men who volunteered for that role," I said, "but thank you." "Do you have access to your bank?" he asked. "Online?" "I have a checkbook," I said. "I can walk there." He considered. "We'll call them now on speaker. You'll tell them you've revoked the POA and want a note on your account. I'll fax them a copy with your signature. It should be enough to make a teller pause if someone shows up with that old paper." We did it. 3 transfers, 4 minutes on hold, 1 supervisor who wanted to remind me that revocations require processing. "I'm not paced," I said. "I don't need time to set." Marcus gave me a look like he might applaud. When the papers were stacked and my breath had evened out, he leaned back. "Miss Alvarez," he said, "I'm going to give you advice I shouldn't need to give. Don't sign anything else without me reading it. If someone shows up with a notary and a sad story, shut your door. You are allowed to say no. It's a complete sentence." "I taught my son that phrase," I said. "He never learned the punctuation." He smiled. "We'll add some." On my way out, I paused at the blue flyer and touched the photograph of the woman in red. "Thank you," I told a stranger's grandmother, "because gratitude, like grief, is a language the dead still speak." Evelyn intercepted me in the hallway like a linebacker. "Well?" I chewed, I said. "Now I wait to see if anyone spits."
She clapped her hands once. "Good girl." That evening, the sun did the thing it does where it makes everything look like forgiveness. Shadows of maple leaves shivered on my bedspread. I opened the top drawer of the dresser and took out the copies of the deed and the mortgage satisfied, fanned them like cards in a trick I was finally ready to perform. I wrote the names I knew in a column, then underlined the ones I didn't. I wrote Marcus in block letters at the top of a page, then his office number. I wrote revocation like a banner. After dinner, I walked with Evelyn to the receptionist's desk and slid the certified letter envelope into the slot. The green card peered up like a small green eye that would soon watch my son sign for news he wouldn't like. The thunk of the flap closing sounded more official than any vow I've made in years. Back in my room, the beige phone blinked. 1 voicemail. I pressed the button. His voice arrived out of a small tin world. "Mom," Daniel said, breathless, excited in a way that used to mean he'd scored a goal. "This is incredible. We had 8 showings before lunch. 2 offers are already over asking. Lena says we could close by the end of the month if we push title. I told them I can sign everything on your behalf, so we're not—" Beep. Time ran out on his brag. The machine asked me if I wanted to save or delete. I pressed 3 for save. I wanted his exact words later, unblurred by memory, evidence in his own voice of which "we" he meant. I lay on my bed and studied the texture of the ceiling. The moth had either found his way outside or made peace with the light. The house is not a person, I reminded myself. It is wood and plaster, wiring and pipes. And then I reminded myself that bodies are also plumbing and beams. We decide what is sacred, and then we defend it. I pictured the maple out back, the one here and the one there. Roots find water even under concrete. It takes them time, it takes them patience, it takes them the faith that there is water somewhere worth the reaching. Tomorrow, Marcus would walk into a county building with fluorescent misery and stand in line with a folder cradled like a heart. He would hand my revocation across a counter to a clerk who has seen every permutation of human disappointment and triumph. A stamp would come down. A record would be made. In a database whose pages are glass, my no would be writ into the city's memory. I turned off the lamp. The room held me the way a train holds a sleeping passenger, moving even when you can't feel it. Before sleep took me, I spoke into the dark the only prayer I know that isn't bargaining. Let me keep my wits and my papers. Let me choose the terms of my own small wars. The building settled. A pipe knocked once, like a judge with a gavel. I smiled. This time, the start belonged to me. On Monday, the sky woke up undecided, part blue, part threat. I ironed a shirt anyway, because some days the only thing you can command is the line where a sleeve meets a shoulder. At 8:30, the beige phone rang with purpose instead of apology. "Good morning, Miss Alvarez," Marcus said. "You now have an audience with the county recorder. The revocation is stamped and indexed. I'm emailing the listing agent and the brokerage again with the stamped copy. Title company, too, just in case an offer somehow rocketed through the weekend." The word stamped gave me the same small hollow thunder in the ribs the notary's seal had. "Thank you," I said. I wanted to ask if this is how battles are fought now, by sending PDFs into the world to scare strangers, but he answered before I asked. "Also," he said, "if you can make it, don't go alone. If your son is there, emotions may run high. Do not sign anything. Do not get drawn into hallway negotiations. If you want to retrieve personal items, that's your right. Take a witness with a camera in her phone."
"I can take a bird with better manners than my son," I said, "but I'll take a woman instead." Evelyn's granddaughter, Jess, worked the early shift at a coffee kiosk and showed up at Maplewood still smelling like espresso and ambition. "We're doing recon?" she asked, eyes bright as new nickels. "We're visiting my house," I said, "to see what color grief looks when you roll it on the walls." "Hop in," she said, unlocking a dented Corolla with stickers that declared various causes worth caring about. Evelyn buckled herself with the solemnity of sailors and handed me a paper bag. "Sandwich," she said. "War requires protein." The drive felt like cheating on a diet I never agreed to. Every turn knew us. The grocery store where the carrots are always untrustworthy. The laundromat that changed owners but not the smell. When we turned onto my street, the world narrowed like a throat. There it was, our maple, taller than my memory allowed, throwing patient shade across the lawn. And beneath it, the sign like bad punctuation, "For sale." A plastic brochure box clung to the post like a barnacle. "Pull up here," I said, and Jess nosed the Corolla to the curb across from the house. Grige is the color of pretending nothing ever happened. It covered the living room walls now, visible through the front window, a public politeness smeared over my life. The front door wore a cheerful wreath that didn't belong to any season I respected. On the porch, a woman in black jeans and a blazer flipped through a clipboard with the performative efficiency of someone auditioning for competence, the listing agent. She had the glossy hair of a person who trusts their own choices. "Smile with your teeth, not your soul," Evelyn murmured, and we crossed the street. "Good morning," the agent said, taking us in like a retail display. "We'll be open for private showings between 10 and 2. Do you have an appointment?" "I have a deed," I said. That lifted her eyes. "And you are?" "The owner," I said. I saw the calculation. Surprise, then the scramble to reconcile me with the email Marcus would have sent by now. She was good. Her face barely flinched. "Mrs. Alvarez," she said smoothly, as if we'd been on a first-name basis since birth. "Kara Benson, we've actually just gotten some wonderful interest." "You've also gotten a revocation of the power of attorney you were relying on," I said. "It's recorded. The index will show it." Her smile tightened, a ribbon pulled too far. "Our office received something this morning, yes. We're reviewing with counsel. In the meantime, any representation that you have authority to sell this house without me present is inaccurate," I said, and wheeled toward the door. "I'm going inside." She tried to step into the doorway, then thought better of it. "We'll need to reschedule showings until we clarify title," she said, but she said it to her clipboard more than to me. The key slid easily, the way bodies remember each other when the mind is stubborn. When the door swung open, the smell hit me. New paint, lemon cleaner, a whisper of someone else's idea of heaven. The stager had done her job competently, which is to say, the house now looked like everyone's dream and no one's life. My quilts were gone, replaced by thin throws that draped like fashion newsletters. The family photos from the hallway had been replaced by black and white ocean prints so toothless they should have been ashamed. "Breathe through your mouth," Evelyn said gently, "perfume of real estate." We moved room by room. In the dining room, my oak table was a leaner, smoother cousin with no nicks from third-grade math homework. In the kitchen, someone had arranged a bowl of oranges under the window where Miguel used to stand and whistle badly while coffee gurgled. The refrigerator door was naked, no magnets spelling grocery lists, no crooked pictures of dogs. "Breathe through your mouth," Evelyn said gently, "perfume of real estate." We moved room by room. In the dining room, my oak table was a leaner, smoother cousin with no nicks from third-grade math homework. In the kitchen, someone had arranged a bowl of oranges under the window where Miguel used to stand and whistle badly while coffee gurgled. The refrigerator door was naked, no magnets spelling grocery lists, no crooked pictures of dogs. "Check your drawers," Jess said, human and practical. "Spoon drawers are never staged." I pulled open the top drawers like they might bite. In the third, beneath a new plastic cutlery tray, my recipe box with the rubber band around it waited like a patient friend. I slipped it into my bag. Miguel's toolbox lurked in the hall closet behind a tasteful throw pillow. I slid the heavy thing out, it bumped the baseboard and made a small, astonished sound. Kara appeared in the doorway like a cat pretending to be a butler. "Mrs. Alvarez, for insurance purposes, can we limit removal of items until—" "Until what?" I said. "My son sells the house out from under me? No." She looked at Jess, at the camera phone in her hand, at the elderly woman with the fighter pilot eyes. She recalibrated. "We'll put the listing on hold pending documentation," she said, and the phrasing contained a certain dignity. "My brokerage prefers clean files." "Good," I said, and then walked to the hallway where the photographs used to be. The nail holes stood like tiny punctuation marks in a sentence someone tried to delete. I put my hand on the wall because there are some habits you don't apologize for. "Mrs. Klein?" The voice came from the front yard. The neighbor, hair the color of dry wheat, body wrapped in a fleece robe despite the hour. She had a mug in her hand and worry in her mouth. "Is that you?" "It's me," I called, and she hurried up the steps and folded me in the kind of hug that includes scolding. "I told that boy not to do it this way," she said into my shoulder. "I told him I'd testify to your competence. He said things a man says when he wants to feel like a boy again." "Thank you for watching," I said. "I've been watching you since you moved in," she said, and dabbed at her eye with the sleeve of her robe. "Do you want the binder? I keep all the neighborhood flyers and notices. There was a letter about an HOA meeting your son attended. He made friends with the worst man on the block." I almost laughed. "We don't have an HOA." "We do now," she said, "or rather, they think we do. You should come, or send that lawyer." Jess, efficient as weather, documented the garage, the sign, the box of brochures. She photographed the notice I wrote on lined paper and taped to the inside of the front window. "Owner disputes sale. Contact Marcus Leo, ESQ. Confusion is a disinfectant. It keeps careless hands away." We gathered what mattered: Miguel's toolbox, the recipe box, the box of loose photographs Kara had shoved into a white bin as if they were spilled sugar. In the bedroom, my wedding dress slept in a garment bag like a moth. I took it. Jess took the box of letters from the closet top shelf, back when letters were still written with ink and risk. I took the quilt my sister had made the year the dog learned to howl along with sirens. You learn the oddest inventory of your own life when someone threatens it. We had just stacked the last box by the door when the energy in the house changed the way air changes when lightning considers its options. The lock turned. Daniel stepped in. He looked good, which made me furious.
Good jacket, shoes that meant business, hair that might have secrets. Lena hovered behind him in sunglasses too large for the day. He stopped when he saw me holding the recipe box. He looked from me to the note on the window and then to Kara, who tried very hard to stare at her clipboard like it was a bull in a tiny field. "Mom," he said, "what are you doing?" "Rescuing my life from your taste in paint," I said. His jaw worked. "Okay," he said, and threw his hands up like a man moderate enough to catalog his own patience. "Everyone take a breath. We've got offers. We can close above asking. This is good for you. You can have a private room, better facility, more care. You deserve." "A say," I said. "I deserve a say."
"You don't understand how complicated this is," he said. I could tell from the place his voice went that he'd practiced that sentence in a mirror. "I understand durable power of attorney does not transfer the deed," I said. "I understand I revoked it. I understand your realtor and your title company have been notified. I understand that any buyer will run from a clouded title like the house is on fire." His face changed shape. Not softer, meaner. "You're making this hard," he said. "I am trying to help you." "By taking my house?" I asked. "We've always had different definitions of help." Lena stepped forward. Up close, she smelled like citrus and the kind of hunger boutiques sell. "Mrs. Alvarez," she said, "we're optimizing your quality of life. Daniel has been under unimaginable pressure." "From whom?" Evelyn asked, because she is generous, but she is not an idiot. "The venture," Lena said. "The seed round closed, and then the market shifted, and we had to," she glanced at Daniel, "we had to float payroll." "Float," I repeated, picturing my house on a river of other people's emergencies. "With what, Daniel?" He looked at the recipe box like it might tell him the right answer. "Leverage," he said. "It's just leverage." "And what happens when the leverage slips?" I asked. I put the recipe box on the hall table and set both my hands on it, because sometimes you need to touch what you won't surrender. "Do you know what leverage did to your father's back? He lifted too much for too many people for too long. He broke. I buried him with a bill from the hospital and a promise to keep this roof over us." His eyes went glassy, then hard. "You're being dramatic." "And you're being a thief," Evelyn said conversationally, like she was commenting on the weather. He rounded on her. "Who are you?" "Air support," she said, and smiled in a way that suggested he should not test the artillery. Kara cleared her throat. "Given the current dispute," she said to the room, which is always safer than saying it to a person, "the listing is placed on hold effective immediately. No showings today." Daniel stared at her, betrayed by the universe he thought he'd paid off. "You can't?" "I can," she said, and now her competence wasn't performative. It was a blade. "My license number is not going to be attached to a lawsuit. Speak to your counsel, Mr. Alvarez." He shoved a hand through his hair and paced the kitchen like a man looking for a wall soft enough to run through. Finally, he stopped at the sink, rested both hands on the counter, and faced the window where the maple threw leaves like coins. "Okay," he said, like he was agreeing to jump off a cliff as long as he could keep his shoes. "Okay, we pause, but you can't stay here." "I haven't stayed here," I said. "You removed me. That's done. This other thing? That's done too. We'll decide later, on my terms, what happens to the house." He laughed once, short, ugly. "What? Are you going to move back?" His voice made the idea obscene. "I am going to be where I choose to be," I said, "and you will pay for the stager and the paint and every brochure you printed that told the world I didn't exist." For a second, the boy I raised came to the surface, like a fish confusing glass with water. He looked young and scared and very tired. Then Lena's hand touched his sleeve, and the fish darted away. He pointed at the boxes. "Take your memorabilia," he said, "but you're not taking the house from me." "It was never yours to take," I said.
We loaded the Corolla in a silence that had edges. Kara held the door. Mrs. Klein brought over the binder with flyers and a plate covered in foil because she is the sort of woman who believes hunger complicates grief. Lena watched with her sunglasses still on, a woman who didn't trust daylight. When the trunk shut, I turned back to the maple. I touched the bark. I have never been the kind of person who talks to trees, but I said thank you under my breath anyway, for staying where I put you when everything else learned to move. On the ride back, Jess narrated like a competent documentary voiceover. We have an indexed revocation, a broker spooked enough to hit pause, photographic evidence of condition, and a neighbor with intelligence and carbs. Next steps? Marcus will advise, I said. But I imagine we send the hold notice widely, we lodge the revocation with the MLS if that's a thing, we tell the title company we'll sue for slander of title if they try to close, and then we eat the sandwich. Evelyn patted my knee. That last part is the most important, she said. Revenge runs on rye. Back in my room, the maple shadows looked friendlier. I put the recipe box on the dresser and the toolbox under the bed like a talisman. I hung the wedding dress in the closet as if ceremony could keep thread from forgetting. Then I called Marcus. He picked up on the second ring. I told him everything with only the minor edits pride requires. Good, he said when I finished. Benson Realty has already emailed me. They've pulled the listing status to temporarily off market. Title company replied that they will not insure a transfer without your in-person execution of the deed. That's 2 legs of the stool. What's the third? I asked. The son, he said. He can still cause trouble. He can change locks, he can move money, he can try to execute something called a quitclaim deed if he finds a notary that doesn't ask questions. We'll preempt as much of that as we can. I'm drafting a letter to him now demanding return of keys, identifying any changes he's made, and requesting an accounting of any funds he's touched. We'll send it certified and by email. If he violates, we ask a judge for an injunction. Will a judge listen? I asked. They tend to listen when mothers come with receipts, he said. And you, Miss Alvarez, have receipts. When I hung up, I noticed a new envelope slid under my door. Maplewood Mail. Inside was a change of address confirmation from the post office, cheerful as a balloon. It said my mail would now be delivered to a P.O. box downtown. The effective date was yesterday. I stared at the paper and felt the floor tilt. Then I walked to the beige phone and dialed the number the form provided, patient as rainfall. A recorded voice thanked me for my patriotism and love of mail. Eventually, a human answered, older than my son, but younger than my rage. I didn't file this, I said. Please cancel the change. Effective now. The forward order was fraudulent. Can you verify your identity? She asked. I did. Then read her the P.O. box number. She made a small sound full of professional disgust. We've had 3 of these this week, she said. People are unbelievable. I'll cancel the forward and flag your address. You'll want to pick up anything already sent to the box. Bring ID. Bless you, I said, and meant it. I called Marcus back. Add mail fraud to the letter, I said. That's the 3rd leg, he replied. That night, Evelyn and I sat outside under the garden maple. The sunflower looked taller, or maybe I was. The air slipped from warm to kind. He changed my mail, I said, like you change laundry, from a thing people notice to a thing that disappears. He's drowning, she said. Drowning men pull people under. Wise ones learn to float on their backs. I'm not his life raft, I said. I'm shore. Good, she said. Shore wins. It's patient.
I thought about patience and about the different shapes it takes, waiting for bread to rise, for paint to dry, for boys to learn the truth about themselves. I thought about grige, that dishonest color, and about how a house can still be a house beneath the lies we spread on it to impress strangers. When I turned in, a voice waited on the machine. Daniel again, later now, calmer, the edge filed to a lawyer's idea of reason. Mom, he said, I got the emails. We're going to do this the right way. But I need you to see the bigger picture. The company will fail without this injection. Investors will sue. I could lose everything. Is that what you want? After everything I've tried to do for you?" There it was, the old trick, the hook baited with guilt. I pressed 3 to save it. I have learned to collect the things a person says when he believes words can buy what money cannot. I set the message beside the recipe box in my mind. Tomorrow, I would go to the post office with Jess and a folder that contained my name in ink and some new fierceness. Tomorrow, Marcus would send letters, and the title company would file my no like a jewel in glass. Tomorrow, the maple at home would keep throwing shade over the sign that needed to come down. Tonight, in a room that was not my house but was mine, I counted what I had: papers with teeth, a friend with a granddaughter and a car, a lawyer who wrote like a man building a ladder, a neighbor who saves binders and makes foil-wrapped mercy, a post office clerk who believes in the integrity of envelopes, and a spine that finally remembered its job. Greisch can't win against a woman who learned to love color when it was free. I turned off the lamp. Somewhere in the building, a radio played a song about going home. I closed my eyes and pictured my maple, the one that stayed, leaves tipping their faces to the dark like they knew exactly what they were doing. The wind moved. The house, my house, listened. And for the first time since the blue tabs, I slept without dreaming of signatures. Tuesday felt like a clean shirt and a sharpened pencil. I put on lipstick the color of authority, Evelyn insisted, and tucked the folder with my papers under my arm the way I used to carry Daniel when he believed I could keep all weather off his head. Jess rolled up in the dented Corolla with a grin and a travel mug that smelled like courage. "Post office first," she said, "then county, then whatever comes next." "Whatever comes next," I echoed, which is how wars announce themselves without scaring the neighbors. The clerk at the downtown branch recognized my voice from yesterday's call. He had a face gentle enough to take bad news from. "Miss Alvarez," he said, sliding a plastic bin through the window. "Everything that made it to the box before the cancel went through. I flagged your street so nothing else forwards without an in-person request from you." The bin held a small mountain. Postcard grins from realtors, an HOA-looking flyer with fonts that didn't trust themselves, envelopes with windows, one thin certified letter that vibrated with a particular kind of arrogance. Jess set her phone to camera and filmed the mail like evidence in a crime show. Back in the car, I sorted. A bank envelope addressed to me at the P.O. box, stamped urgent and red, a little too proud of itself. Inside, a letter confirming a wire transfer authorization initiated by D. Alvarez under power of attorney that had been flagged for additional verification. My hands went cold, then steady. "Read it," I said. Jess read, eyebrows climbing. "Guess who is not wiring anything," she said, and took a picture of the letter next to my revocation like two pieces in a puzzle that finally agreed. The HOA flyer announced a Neighborhood Improvement Council meeting in a garage on Wednesday night with an agenda that included uniform standards, front yard aesthetics, and delinquency remedies. The name at the bottom made me laugh without humor. Ron Pritchard, Chair, Mrs. Klein's worst man on the block. The certified envelope wore the return address of a staging company I'd never hired. Inside, a notice of claim of lien on my property for labor, services, equipment, or materials in the amount of $18,450, recorded yesterday, lien and legal, like a pickpocket with a diploma. My heart did that animal thing it does right before teeth. Jess exhaled a word not generally printed on church bulletins. "Is that even real?" "Mechanics lien," I said. "When you're careless, legitimacy can be rented by the hour." "We call Marcus," she said, already dialing. She angled the phone so I could hear. He didn't waste my panic. "Don't hand it power," he said. "We'll pull the recorded lien, check the claim of work, and file a notice of contest and a demand for release. If they're dirty, they'll fold at the first letter. If they're stubborn, we'll petition to expunge and seek fees. Do I breathe while you do that? I asked. Strongly recommended, he said. Also, call your bank and freeze external wires pending in-person authorization. I'll send them the revocation again. We drove to the county building, a concrete hive where hope and bureaucracy keep cautious company. The records clerk printed the lien. Creative Home Staging, LLC, claiming material improvements including paint labor, fixtures, decor, and, my favorite, landscape revitalization. No contract attached, no signature of mine, no description beyond work performed at the property known as. They recorded without a contract, Jess said, scandalized on my behalf. They recorded because recording is cheap, I said. Truth is expensive. Marcus texted while we were still at the counter. Drafting demand. Do not contact claimant. Let me punch first. We ate lunch at the diner where I once slung coffee for men who believed their opinions were condiments. Rosita was still behind the counter, hair higher than reason, heart larger than the menu. She saw me and screamed the way friends do when they're angry at the world and thrilled to still find you in it. What you need, she asked, setting down a plate without waiting for an answer. Eggs? Witnesses? A crowbar? Paper, I said, and maybe pie. She leaned on the counter, studied my face, and nodded. I got both. While Jess scarfed pancakes and texted evidence to Marcus, I found myself telling Rosita an abridged version. The blue tabs, the lemon cleaner, the sign, the grayish walls that tried to erase me. She listened with the particular stillness of a woman who has outrun storms and knows which clouds matter. You keep every scrap, she said, tapping my folder. Every receipt, every voicemail, every bad sentence he says he didn't mean. A judge can't rule on your feelings, but he can count paper. Back at Maplewood, Janelle met me at the desk with a new sheet on a clipboard. Per your request, she said, we have a do not disclose and do not admit list on file. No visitors unless you approve. No paperwork delivered to your room without me here. If anyone shows up with a notary, I will show them the door. My favorite sport, Evelyn said, appearing with a perfectly timed cough. Also, Janelle added, a courier left a packet. I didn't accept it. I told him to send it to your attorney. Bless you, I said again, because these days my atheism is riddled with gratitude.
The phone on my nightstand blinked while we were making tea. 2 messages. Daniel's voice first, the kind he uses at pitch decks and family arguments. Mom, I heard about the revocation. This is dramatic and unnecessary. The lien is standard. We'll pay it out of escrow. The HOA is updating covenants to protect property values. Don't let people get in your ear who don't understand how any of this works. I saved it. The second message was shorter and came later, Lena's tone silk over steel. Mrs. Alvarez, we are offering you a monthly stipend and a private suite at a better facility if you cooperate. In return, you will execute the deed and... I let the machine finish her sentence by running out of tape. I didn't need the rest to know what my answer was. Marcus called at 4. Demand to release lien filed and sent, he said. They have 20 days to respond or face a petition and fees. I've also notified the listing agent that any promise to pay from escrow is a non-starter. No escrow, no pay. Additionally, I spoke with your bank. External wires are blocked pending your in-person approval. What's the over-under on a knock at my door from a notary with a sad story? I asked. I asked Maplewood to put a copy of your do not disclose policy in a frame, he said. Also, I drafted a cease and desist to your son about contacting you regarding legal matters. From now on, everything runs through me. Bless you, I said for the 3rd time in a day. Wednesday, I ironed again because order is a muscle. Jess drove us to Mrs. Klein's for the Neighborhood Improvement Council meeting. Her living room smelled like cinnamon and resolve. Neighbors gathered in good shoes and bad moods. We walked to Ron Pritchard's garage as a flock, the way neighborhoods do when they remember their one. Ron had printed an agenda and bought a gavel from the internet. He wore a polo shirt embroidered with a logo that belonged to nothing, and the drinker's confidence that a clipboard can make a law. The garage had folding chairs in rows, and a poster board with bylaws written in a Sharpie that had tried very hard. "Welcome," he said, rapping the gavel on a card table. "We're here to protect our investments. Property values are all of us. The goal is uniform standards and enforcement mechanisms, including fines." "Enforcement with what authority?" a woman asked from the second row. He waved the question away like a fly. "Don't be adversarial, Sarah," he said. "This is community." It was theater until Marcus walked in and turned it into fact. He wore a navy suit no garage deserved and introduced himself with the soft manners of a man who keeps a sledgehammer in his briefcase. "May I ask a few questions?" he said. Ron, flattered to be questioned by a grown-up, nodded. "Has the neighborhood ever recorded covenants, conditions, and restrictions running with the land?" Marcus asked. Blank stares. "No? Okay. Have you filed articles of incorporation for an association?" More stares. "Do you have adopted bylaws signed by a quorum of owners consistent with recorded covenants?" Even the Sharpie poster wilted a little. "We have this," Ron said, waving a stapled packet, "and I have pledges. People want a fence height standard." "Wonderful," Marcus said. "You can have a social club. What you can't have is a homeowners association with the power to fine, lien, or foreclose without recorded covenants and proper formation. Any representation otherwise would be misleading and potentially fraudulent." "We are protecting values," Ron said, red flushing his neck. "Look at Ruth's yard." "Look at my yard," I said, stepping forward, because shame, like a knife, can be handed back to whoever brought it. "The lawn I cut myself for 29 years? The maple I planted with my husband? You tried to fine me while I was in a care facility my son put me in so he could stage my house." The room exhaled. Mrs. Klein, small but mighty, raised a binder like a shield. "Ron," she said, "you put flyers through our doors without a return address. You are not the law." "We're voting," he huffed, gaveling like a drum. "All in favor of uniform paint colors?" A dozen hands stayed firmly in laps. Someone laughed. Marcus handed Ron a card. "If you have questions about forming a lawful association, call me," he said. "In the meantime, do not represent to any buyer or seller that fines or liens exist. You could be sued for slander of title." By the time we walked back to Mrs. Klein's, the neighborhood felt like a group that had remembered its name. Cars idled with courtesy. The porch lights looked like allies. It is an underrated joy to watch a bully learn the limits of Sharpie. Thursday arrived with a courier at Maplewood who left nothing because Janelle has a spine. He did, however, leave his business card and a note that said, "Family Settlement Agreement. Please call for signing." I poured tea like ceremony and read the agreement copy that had made it to Marcus's inbox. It offered me $2,500 a month for life in exchange for execution of warranty deed and release of all claims. It included a non-disparagement clause that would gag a hurricane. I didn't need to call to know what they were offering me. Silence, dressed up as kindness. Marcus filed a petition that afternoon. Temporary restraining order, injunctive relief, and declaratory judgment. He had all the words of a man who has built ladders for a living. A judge signed the order to show cause and set a hearing for Friday morning. A process server found Daniel that night at a brewery where men go to speak fluently in hops, and put the papers into his hand with the kind of politeness that rudeness looks cheap. "Court tomorrow," Marcus texted. "You don't need to testify unless you want to. I'll carry the law. You just carry your name." I slept in a dress because it felt like armor. At 2 in the morning, the beige phone blanked. I almost let it go, then pressed play, because sometimes you need to hear the voice of the thing you're fighting. "Mom," Daniel said, low and furious and trying to be reasonable, like a man who thinks reason is a leash. "You're embarrassing me. You're humiliating me. Lena's parents are asking questions. Investors are nervous. You will lose in court. I have emails, I have witnesses, I have every text where you said you were tired and couldn't keep up the house. You asked me to help, remember?
You begged. Don't make me bring that up."
I saved it and sat in the dark with the machine's tiny red light like a sentinel. The words didn't land where he'd intended them to. Tired is not incompetent. Asking for help is not signing over a life. Memory is not a weapon if you refuse to hand it to the wrong man. At dawn, I went to the garden to breathe where the plants breathe, and the world reissues your permission to remain. The sunflower had opened into an impossible face. It didn't ask anyone for rights. It didn't apologize for height. The maple lifted its hands to the new light the way prayer is supposed to look before we weigh it down with bargains. Back in my room, I polished my shoes like I was going somewhere that required shine. I put the recipe box in the top drawer of the dresser because superstitions are just stories you don't want to test. I touched the photograph of Daniel at 10, gap-toothed and wild-eyed, and told him something he might still understand. I will love you for as long as I live, but I will not let you take my house. Evelyn arrived in slacks and a cardigan the color of triumph. Jess brought coffee and donuts and a notebook labeled Ruth Wins in bubble letters because mockery is fuel. Janelle handed me a paper bag with a water bottle and tissues as if she'd attended 1,000 tiny trials and knew the small things justice forgets. The drive to the courthouse took 12 minutes and 1 lifetime. The building had pillars bigger than anyone's temper. The hallway smelled like old paper and new hope. Marcus met us by the elevators, tie straight, eyes bright, a stack of exhibits clipped in the kind of order that makes rude men tired. "You ready?" he asked. "I've been ready since Blue Tabs," I said. He smiled. "Let's go tell the state you're no." When the double doors swung, I thought of the way a house sounds when you come home after a trip. The soft, surprised hush, like it missed you. I carried my name like a key. I carried my papers like a map. I carried the sense that paper cuts do, in fact, draw blood. But sometimes that's how you find out you're still alive. Courtrooms smell like wood that's been made to behave. The pew benches, the rail, the judge's dais, everything in calm, carved lines, as if furniture could remind people not to lie. I sat at counsel table beside Marcus, palms flat on the cool varnish, and listened to the bailiff call my case in a voice that could make weddings sound like warnings. "Alvarez versus Alvarez," he said, and the syllables built a bridge I had no interest in crossing. Daniel arrived with a lawyer who looked like he'd been poured into his suit and forgotten to say when. Lena trailed behind in a dress the color of money and forgiveness, sunglasses pushed into her hair like a crown. Daniel didn't quite look at me. He looked at the papers stacked at our table and then at the judge's bench and swallowed like a man rinsing his mouth with pride. "All rise," the bailiff said. We rose. The judge swept in, robes moving like good advice. She had the calm eyes of a woman who has seen every version of the same story and is still willing to hear yours. "We are here on petitioner Ruth Alvarez's application for temporary restraining order and order to show cause preliminary injunction," the clerk intoned. "Allegations include improper use of power of attorney, attempted transfer of real property without consent, fraudulent mail forwarding, and clouding title via lien." The judge looked down. "Counsel, appearances." "Marcus Liu for petitioner," Marcus said, smooth as clean glass. "Bradley Carr for respondent," said the suit beside Daniel, a man whose cologne seemed to want to file its own brief. "Good morning," the judge said. "I've read the papers."
Those are the words you want in a courtroom, the promise that someone did their homework before deciding your weather. Marcus stood. "Your Honor, we seek narrow relief. We ask the court to enjoin respondent from acting under a revoked power of attorney, from transferring, encumbering, or otherwise disposing of petitioner's real property, from forwarding her mail, and from contacting her directly about legal matters. We also ask for an order that all keys be returned and that any recorded lien by the staging company be released or justified." "Mr. Carr," the judge asked. Carr rose and arranged his face into earnestness. "Your Honor, this is a family dispute dressed up as litigation. My client has been caring for his aging mother. He moved her into a reputable facility and began the process of liquidating an asset that has become a burden. He is not stealing, he is trying to ensure his mother's safety and quality of life. We contest the suggestion that Miss Alvarez has the capacity to manage complex financial decisions and— Marcus's hand touched my forearm under the table. Wait. The judge's eyes narrowed, just a hair. Are you filing a petition for conservatorship, Mr. Carr? We, reserve that right, Your Honor. We are evaluating. In other words, not today, she said. Go on. Carr shifted. The durable power of attorney was executed voluntarily. Any revocation occurred after my client had already incurred expenses, staging, painting, that will be paid out of escrow. No escrow exists, Marcus said, polite, lethal. And no valid contract binds Miss Alvarez to any staging company. The lien was recorded without a signature and will not withstand challenge. The judge lifted a hand, palm open. We'll get there. She looked at me then, not through me. Miss Alvarez, would you step forward? The room made that small sound rooms make when they expect a woman to tremble and she disappoints them. I took the oath. The bailiff's Bible had that dusty courthouse weight to it. My voice was steady. Miss Alvarez, the judge said, did you sign a durable power of attorney? Yes, I said, in my son's car. The engine was running. Did anyone explain it to you? My son said it was HIPAA paperwork so nurses could talk to him. The judge's mouth didn't change. Her pen did. It moved. And did you later revoke that instrument? I did, I said, at the legal clinic at Maplewood. Mr. Liu drafted the revocation. I signed it before a notary. He recorded it with the county recorder. We sent copies to the realtor, the title company, my bank, and my son. Do you understand what a revocation means? She asked. It means what it says, I replied. My son no longer has my permission to act for me. Carr stood for cross, smoothing his tie like a man calming a pet. Miss Alvarez, you've told your son you're tired, that maintaining the house is difficult. True? I told him I was tired, I said. That's not incompetence. That's human. You asked him for help, he said. I did, I said. I did not ask him to sell my house. You live in a care facility, he pressed. Maplewood. You receive assistance with daily living. I receive coffee, I said, and occasionally a reminder not to sign things in idling cars. A ripple went through the gallery. The judge let it pass like weather. Miss Alvarez, Carr said, patient as a dentist. Isn't it true that your house is worth in excess of $800,000, that it is an aging property requiring repairs, and that your son's plan would give you dozens of years of care? It's also true my name is on the deed, I said. Consent is not a repair you can outsource. Carr's jaw worked. No further questions. Marcus stood. One follow-up, Your Honor. He held up the certified mail green card. Miss Alvarez, did your son change your mail to a P.O. box? I didn't, I said. The post office canceled the forward when I called. They said it happens more than you'd think. The judge wrote again. Wood, ink, law. The small mechanics of power. Marcus called Janelle. She testified in polished scrubs and unflappable kindness. Ms. Alvarez is oriented, lucid, independent in activities of daily living. Maplewood is a supportive environment, not a memory ward. He called the bank's fraud supervisor by Zoom. The attempted wire was flagged. No funds left my account. The POA is marked revoked. He called the title officer. Company will not insure any transfer absent my in-person execution of a deed. Each witness was a rung. Marcus built ladders. Carr called Daniel. My son took the stand and swore like he was promising luck. He did not look at me. His voice found its good college. He told the judge he had always planned to take care of me, that the house was old, that liquidity would liberate me from worry. He painted the lien as standard industry practice. He spoke about investors and payroll and how the economy is a villain that requires men to make hard choices. Did your mother sign a deed? Marcus asked on cross. No, Daniel said. Did you tell the realtor that you had authority to sign on her behalf? She signed a POA, he said. Which was revoked, Marcus said.
Were you aware of the revocation when you scheduled showings? He hesitated, the truth stepping on his foot. We had already engaged services. So that's a yes, Marcus said. Did you change your mother's mailing address to a P.O. box? Daniel's face flinched. It was an administrative convenience. For whom? Marcus asked. For me, Daniel said. For you, Marcus repeated, gently, handing him back his sentence like a mirror. Nothing further. The judge folded her hands. I've heard enough, she said, and every tendon in my neck decided to be a bird. This court finds that petitioner has demonstrated a likelihood of success on the merits, that she will suffer irreparable harm absent injunctive relief, and that the balance of equities favors maintaining the status quo. The temporary restraining order is granted. The words took up physical space in my chest. The judge continued, voice even, precise, fitting orders to facts like lids to jars. Respondent is enjoined from acting under the revoked power of attorney, from changing petitioner's mailing address, from listing, showing, selling, encumbering, or otherwise transferring any interest in the property located at 184 Maple Street, from entering into any contracts on petitioner's behalf, and from contacting petitioner regarding legal or financial matters outside counsel. Respondent shall return all keys to petitioner's counsel within 24 hours. The listing shall reflect temporarily off-market pending further order. The staging company shall show cause within 14 days why its lien should not be expunged and why it should not pay petitioner's fees. Title is directed to note the revocation and this order in its file. She looked at Daniel then, not unkindly, not kindly, officially. Mr. Alvarez, your mother is competent. If you intend to pursue conservatorship, you may file the appropriate petition. But understand that conservatorships are not shortcuts to close escrows. Carr stood like a man sitting. Your Honor, may we be heard on the stipend our clients offered, Ms. Alvarez? You may, the judge said, in mediation. I am not in the business of approving hush money. A snort from the gallery died quickly. The judge signed the TRO with a pen that made the faintest chorus on paper. Preliminary injunction hearing in 30 days. In the meantime, counsel will exchange documents. If I learn that anyone plays games with mail again, I will issue sanctions that have real numbers.
We filed out into the hallway where everyone becomes human again. A reporter I didn't know adjusted her lanyard, scanning faces. Evelyn hugged me so hard something old in my spine straightened. Jess did a tiny silent dance, the way girls do when their grandmothers are watching. Marcus shook my hand like a colleague and then, just once, squeezed it like a friend. Keys, he said quietly to Carr, who was pretending to check his phone, 24 hours. Carr nodded, which is the lawyer word for surrender. Daniel hovered 10 feet away, Lena attached at the elbow. He looked wrecked in that way men do when the world refuses to be improved by their explanations. I could feel the tug, the maternal reflex to straighten his tie, to ask if he'd eaten, to apologize for the difficult work of being told no. It passed through me like a weather front and moved on. Mom, he said, finally, voice low, can we talk? In front of my lawyer, I said. He swallowed. You're going to ruin me. I'm going to stop you from ruining me, I said. What you do with the rest is not my job. Lena's mouth flattened. This will look bad, she murmured, her eyes flicking toward the reporter, toward the world, for everyone. That's what honesty does to liars, Evelyn said pleasantly, appearing as if conjured. It ruins the lighting. Marcus guided me to the elevator. In the metallic hush, he exhaled a little. You did well. I told the truth, I said. Most people think that's the same thing, he said. It isn't. Outside, the sky had chosen blue. We walked to Jess's car in a cluster of relief and adrenaline. The wind lifted the edges of my jacket like a curtain. Across the street, a maple, different from mine, cousins in leaf, flashed a handful of green. I thought of the judge's face when she said my name. I thought of stamps and orders and words that finally meant what they were supposed to mean. At Maplewood, Janelle met us with a grin that made her look 10. We listened to the stream, she confessed. Marcus is famous in the South Wing. Tell them the sledgehammer worked, I said. She handed me an envelope with a courier sticker. From Benson Realty, she said, hand-delivered. I waited for you. Inside, a short, careful note from Kara. Listing status, TOM per court order. Keys in counsel's possession. Apologies for any distress. A business card with a handwritten line. If you ever want to sell, with you, call me. Not today, not tomorrow. But the difference with you is the difference between theft and consent. By late afternoon, Marcus forwarded an email. Subject, lien release. 2 sentences. Please find attached a release of claim recorded today. And our client withdraws its claim with prejudice. A PDF glowed on the screen like someone had turned on a light in a room I'd been told was condemned. Bullies don't like judges, Evelyn said, bringing in tea, or women who learn to file. The beige phone blinked once before dinner. I braced and pressed play. It wasn't Daniel. It was a voice from another life. Mrs. Alvarez, this is Maya Ortiz with the Beacon. I cover consumer protection and elder law. I'm sorry to intrude. I was in the gallery today and I'd like to hear your story. Not the scandal version. Her voice was careful, like stepping stones across a creek. The version about how this actually happens and what other people can do when it starts happening to them. On the record if you want, off if you don't. I looked at the machine, at the recipe box on my dresser, at the copy of the deed in my drawer, at the maple shadow moving across my bed like a hand blessing a table.
There will always be a version of me that wants quiet. And there will always be a version that knows silence is what bad men ask for when they're afraid of a woman's voice. The 2 versions have learned to share a room without throwing plates. But tonight, with a court order cooling like bread on the counter, the louder version lifted her chin. I saved Maya's message and wrote her number on the legal pad under the word win. Not because I was ready to talk, because I was ready to decide who gets to hear me when I am. Before lights out, I walked to the garden. The sunflower faced west, confident as a child who trusts sunsets to return. The maple above me stitched the sky into patience. I set my palm against the trunk and felt the faint, slow thrum that might be wind and might be sap and might be the sound a thing makes when it refuses to be moved. Tomorrow, there would be discovery requests and text messages to print and a neighbor's garage to unbuild. There would be breakfast and bingo and the ordinary labor of remaining a person in a world that prefers paperwork to flesh. There would be love for a boy who cannot be trusted with it, and mercy for a woman learning the hard way that mercy sometimes means stop. I turned toward the building. The door opened with a soft, sensible sigh. My room waited the way rooms do when you treat them like promises. On the corkboard, the photo of Daniel at 10 and the dog stared out at a world that had not yet begun to ask them for receipts. Your Honor, I whispered into the quiet, testing how it felt in my mouth now that the morning was over, the order signed, the lines drawn. My name is on the deed. The envelope from Carr's office arrived before breakfast, thick as apology. Inside, a plastic fob and 3 brass keys on a ring with a realtor tag still clipped to it. No note. Marcus sent a 2-word text when he got his copy. Delivered. Documented. I held the keys in my palm and felt a sensation I hadn't expected. Not triumph. Gravity. Responsibility weighs more when you pick it up again after someone else carried it like a trophy. Evelyn shook her bracelet so the charms chimed. Let's change the locks, she said, as if suggesting a matinee. Marcus? I asked on the beige phone. Do it today, he said. Take a locksmith and a witness. Photograph the old cylinders, bag them, label the bags. If anyone asks, you're securing your own property pursuant to a court order. And, Ruth, yes? Leave a paper trail a mile wide. Jess had the car idling 10 minutes later, hair in a messy bun that meant business. She handed me a clipboard with a checklist in bubble letters. Front, back, garage, mail slot, side gate, and a fresh Sharpie that smelled like certainty. The locksmith, a woman in steel-toed boots with a name patch that read Cam, met us at the curb. Court order? She asked. I showed her the stamped pages like a bouncer. She nodded. We'll swap to high-security cylinders, she said. No copies without the card. Anyone tries to pick these, they'll have to bring a chair. Inside, the house still wore that careful emptiness. The grays looked less smug in daylight, as if even paint has the decency to blush.
Cam worked fast, efficient clicks and clacks, tiny screws lined up on a towel like disciplined soldiers. Jess filmed everything, the old brass coming out, the new going in, the way Cam sealed the keys in numbered bags and had me sign across the tape. I labeled the bags with dates and door names like I was naming children. "We should do the mail slot," Cam said, eyeing the oak door. "I can install an interior box with a lock. Keeps people's hands out." "Hands out," I repeated. "Yes."
She drilled neatly, wood curls falling like pale hair. Outside, the maple flicked light across the porch and coins. Mrs. Klein appeared with a thermos and the kind of smile that starts trouble for bullies. "Uniform standards," she said grimly, handing me coffee. "Standard number 1, don't steal your mother's mail." In the kitchen, I opened the drawer where I used to keep odd batteries in improbable rubber bands. The stager had left nothing but a single pencil sharpened to a mean point. I wrote a note on the legal paper we brought and taped it to the inside of the front window, below my first notice. "By court order, no access without owner present." The Sharpie bled a little into the fibers, letters with edges. Good. We walked room to room as if taking attendance. I photographed Miguel's toolbox, the recipe box, the quilt on the chair in my bedroom, the crooked nail in the hall that used to hold our family photos before Grage swallowed them. I took the fake ocean prints off the walls and stacked them on the dining table like lies that had run out of tape. In the garage, Cam pointed at a small black square tucked up near the rafters. "That's a Wi-Fi camera," she said, "battery-powered, not mine." Jess went up the step stool and plucked it down like a wasp. The lens winked at us, a little arrogant eye. "I'll bag it," Jess said, sliding it into an evidence pouch her generation seems to keep in their glove compartments. "If it's live, someone's watching us watch them." "Hi, someone," Evelyn said to the ceiling. "This is the part where you lose." Back at Maplewood by noon, I filed the bags in a plastic bin Janelle labeled House, Secured Items. We photocopied everything. I wrote a memo to myself about the camera and tucked it into the stack. Paper trail, paper spine. My phone blinked with the kind of number that wears a badge. "Mrs. Alvarez? Detective Ivy Ramos, Financial Crimes. Your attorney forwarded a copy of your temporary restraining order and a complaint regarding mail forwarding. Do you have 10 minutes? I did. Ivy's voice was weekday tough and weekend kind. She asked precise questions. Dates, names, documents, amounts. She wanted voicemails. She wanted the bank's flag and hold letter. She wanted the lien and the release. "We get these cases when they're already on fire," she said. "You were early. That's rare." "I had a map," I said, "and women who drove." "We'll open a file," she said. "Mail fraud is federal. The U.S. Postal Inspector will take that piece. The rest we'll monitor. This won't be fast, but it will be visible." Visible. I tried the word on my tongue and found I could swallow it. After lunch, the building settled into its routine. Naps with TVs murmuring, the slow migration of walkers to sunlit corners, the rolling of carts in histories. I took the stamped TRO from my folder and slipped a copy into the frame on my dresser, behind the photo of Daniel at 10. The court order's seal looked like a watermark behind his smile. There are worse metaphors. There are worse protections. Maya Ortiz called at 2:30. "I'll be quick," she said. "I know exhaustion when I hear it. I'm doing a piece, patterns, not gossip. How adult children take dad's watch and then mom's deed. Safeguards. What people can do before someone tells them they're tired and means invisible. You don't have to be on the record." "What does off the record pay?" I asked, surprised at my own mouth. "A little of your time and a lot of my care," she said. "And if you want to go on the record later, you'll already know me." We met in the garden, where truth has fewer walls to bounce off. She was exactly as her voicemail had promised, alert, wary, an eye for the place where a story becomes a map. She asked me to tell it from the beginning, not the legal beginning, but the kind with feelings. The diner years, the mortgage years, the grief years when silence did most of the talking. Daniel's science projects laid out on our kitchen table like proof we had a future. His college brochures, the letter we couldn't afford to mail. "He blames me for that," I said.
For the state school, for my math. My mother blames me for the rain, she said quietly, and yet, here we both are. She tapped her recorder and listened as I described the notary stamp's thunder, the judge's patience, the maple shade, the smell of lemon cleaner that makes memory seem antibacterial. She didn't interrupt to tidy me. She let me be messy and exact. "Can I ask something without getting thrown out of your garden?" she asked when I paused. "You can ask," I said. "Do you still love him?" I looked at the maple. Its leaves made that small applause sound when a mild wind means I'm here. "Yes," I said, "but not with my house." She nodded, wrote that down, then drew a small box around it with her pen, like a reporter building a room for a sentence. "I'll send you an email with resources," she said before she left. "Trusted contacts at Legal Aid, the recorder's office, scam alerts, a template letter to banks. I won't use your name unless you tell me to, but I want to make this useful." "Don't make me a saint," I said. "Make me a map." Her piece went live that night without my name. She called it "Sign Here: How Helping Becomes Theft and How to Stop It." The comments were the internet at its worst and best. Men with opinions about mothers, women with daughters named after storms, a handful of attorneys using their Saturday night to drop statute links like breadcrumbs. 3 emails hit my inbox from people I used to hand coffee to. "Saw this. Proud of you. Need anything?" Rosita texted a heart that looked like it had been drawn on a receipt. The bigger storm arrived at 7:13 p.m., wrapped in PDF. "Emergency ex-parte petition for temporary conservatorship," Marcus read over the phone. "Filed by Mr. Carr. Hearing at 9 tomorrow morning. They're alleging impaired capacity, vulnerability to undue influence, and this is rich, susceptibility to media manipulation." They attached the article. I sat down on the bed like it might understand. "Can they do that?" "They can ask," he said. "They won't get it. Ex parte requires emergency and evidence. They have neither. Even if the judge wants more information, she'll set it out for notice and hearing. Can you be at court by 8:30? "I'll be dressed at 8, I said. He exhaled. "We'll bring Janelle's declaration, we'll bring the bank letter, we'll bring your revocation and the TRO and our ladder of receipts. If the judge wants to look you in the eye and decide whether you're a person, she'll see a person." Sleep came mean. When it finally arrived, it brought me to the old house in winter. In the dream, I'm standing at the front door, frost blooming on the glass, and Miguel is alive and laughing because his whistle cannot hold a tune. Daniel is small and impossible, and everything that is wrong with him hasn't been invented yet. He holds up a paper snowflake he cut too close, so the center tore. "It's ruined," he says. I take the ruined thing and tape it to the window anyway, and the cold makes the tape stutter and the paper shines like lace. I woke at 5 and sat at the desk with the legal pad and wrote a list with my old diner penmanship. What they can't take. My name, my no, my key, my papers, my friends, my maple, my story. Then I wrote a second list. What I might give. A stipend I choose. A sale I oversee. A boundary that doesn't require a gavel. Evelyn tapped my door at 6 in slacks that had opinions. "Dress like a verdict," she said. I put on the good jacket that makes my shoulders remember they are architecture. Janelle slipped me a sealed envelope on my way out. "Affidavit," she said. "Vitals, orientation, independent activities of daily living." I put it in sentences a judge respects. Jess drove like a promise, back straight, eyes forward, the paper bag with protein bars breathing hope between us. The courthouse looked the same as yesterday. Stone, flag, sky, but my legs knew its steps better now. In the elevator, a young man in a tie stared at the floor numbers like they might save him. I wanted to hand him a sandwich. The ex parte calendar had the restless energy of emergencies that aren't. Lawyers murmured in hallways like water finding seams. Marcus found me in the crowd, put the file in my hand so I would feel it, not just trust him to carry it. "If the judge wants to talk to you," he said, "answer like you did yesterday. Not performative, just present. Carr arrived, haggard and hollow-eyed. Daniel followed, sleeves wrinkled, jaw shadowed, Lena not present, which was its own theater. For a second, he looked young enough for pity to try to get dressed. Then I remembered the mail and the sign and the camera and watched Pity put her coat back on and find a different address. We were called first, the same judge. Bless the random assignment gods. Ex parte petitions require a showing of immediate harm, she said without preface. Mr. Carr, tell me why I should consider this without notice. Carr began with a sigh, meant to sound like a burden. Your Honor, Miss Alvarez has become enmeshed with media and adversarial influences. She is vulnerable. My client reports erratic behavior, impulsive decisions, and... The judge lifted a hand. Evidence? Carr held up an exhibit like a shield, the article, still warm from the internet. This encourages her to resist help. Article exhibits are not evidence, the judge said. Do you have a physician's declaration, a geriatric psych evaluation, an adult protective services report, police involvement? No, Carr said, but... Then you do not have an ex parte case, she said. Mr. Liu. Marcus's voice was Sunday calm. Your Honor, Miss Alvarez is competent. You saw her yesterday. You have declarations from her nurse and her bank. There is a court order in place specifically designed to prevent the harm respondent now attempts to invoke. If respondent wishes to pursue conservatorship, he may file, and we will meet him at the gate with facts. Today, he has neither emergency nor evidence. The judge leaned back, like a woman about to deliver the final 2 inches of a nail. Petition for ex parte temporary conservatorship is denied. If respondent files a noticed petition, this case will be assigned per usual rules. I will note for the record that yesterday's hearing and order suggest a strong likelihood this court will not entertain a conservatorship absent compelling, independent medical evidence. Carr tried to salvage something. Your Honor, could the court at least order Miss Alvarez to refrain from speaking to the press about ongoing family matters? The judge looked at him as if he'd asked to borrow her pen to stab the Constitution. No, she said. Next case. We stepped into the hallway like swimmers breaking the surface. Marcus let out a breath he'd been storing for a decade. Jess did the quiet victory dance again, small and fierce. I pressed my palm against the cool marble wall, and felt for a second the building hold me up. Daniel stood a few yards away, head down, the way a man looks when the script he rehearsed didn't follow him to the stage. He walked toward me without his lawyer, and stopped just close enough for the old air to try to get between us. You humiliated me, he said. He didn't spit it. He laid it at my feet like an offering he thought I'd recognize. I kept my voice soft, the way sand is soft, abrasion that pretends to be comfort. You humiliated yourself, I said. The good news is you can stop. His eyes shone. He looked like the boy who broke the window and waited to see if the glass would forgive him. You taught me to fight, he whispered, almost proud. I'm just fighting. I taught you to work, I said. Fighting was free. He opened his mouth and then closed it like a fish baffled by its bowl. He turned away. On the way out, Maya was there, notebook down, hands empty. She didn't lift her phone. She didn't ask for a comment. She just said, "You okay?" "I will be," I said, and surprised myself with how true it felt. Back at Maplewood, Janelle slid a plate of scrambled eggs with cheese across the table like a medal. Evelyn put a sprig of parsley on top with unnecessary ceremony. For valor, she said, and the press. Afternoon brought a tidy email from Marcus with bullet points that sounded like relief wearing a tie. Ex parte denied. TRO intact. Next, discovery. He attached a draft of a durable power of attorney naming a bank trust department as my agent only if I, in writing, say so later. He attached a draft healthcare proxy naming Janelle's colleague, calm, dependable, as my medical agent if I ever go quiet. He attached a letter of instruction about my safe deposit box. He attached a memo on living trusts in case I ever decide that probate is just another word for men talking too long. Choose light now, he wrote, not because you need it, but because someday you might. I read every line and signed the ones that felt like seatbelts, not handcuffs. The notary came in the afternoon with that stamp thunder I had grown to love. I made copies, I labeled envelopes, I gave Janelle the healthcare proxy, and put the bank's number under magnets on my legal pad because old habits deserve new names. Just before dinner, the maple outside our garden did that late-day trick where it turns sunlight into currency and makes you believe you've been paid. I sat on the bench while Evelyn told a story about a man who tried to return a toaster after his divorce because he didn't like the way it remembered her. We laughed like women who expect to earn it. Jess took a picture of us that made our hair look like we'd done something right. The beige phone blinked after I brushed my teeth. I pressed play and heard Lena's voice, minus her sunglasses. "Mrs. Alvarez," she said, and for the first time there was something like salt in it. We're pausing. Investors are skittish. Daniel is a mess. If there is a world in which you would consider selling, with proper counsel, on your timeline, she inhaled. It sounded like swallowing a knife. I'd like to know what that world looks like. I didn't call her back, not yet. Instead, I sat at the desk and wrote a letter to Daniel I didn't intend to send. I will not be your liquidity. I will not be your lesson. I will not be the guilty music you hum to sleep. I will be your mother. That means the door is never locked from the inside. It also means you cannot steal the key. I folded the letter and put it into the recipe box between sopa de lima and cinnamon toast for bad days. Before I turned out the light, I pinned a new photograph to the corkboard, Cam's hands tightening the new lock, the old cylinder lying beside it like a husk. I think that's when it reached me, bone-level simple. Keys aren't about doors. They're about choosing who gets to walk through. The building exhaled. Somewhere, a TV applauded on a loop. I lay down on the cheerful quilt and let my body remember how to live in it. The maple outside laced the glass with leaf shadows, patient as scripture. In the quiet, I could almost hear sap moving, steady, invisible, like a woman who has changed her locks and realized that what she was closing was not a house, but a season.
Tomorrow, there would be discovery requests with little boxes to check and long blanks to fill, a neighborhood garage where a man named Ron would host a meeting no one attends, a bank appointment to add a second factor to a life. There would be more voicemails and fewer surprises. There would be pie with Rosita and a story with Maya if I decided to make a map out of my days. There might even be forgiveness, which is not a key I hand out, but a door I have learned to leave cracked for light. I fell asleep counting locks instead of sheep. I dreamed of the maple, not in my yard or the garden, but in both. Roots talking through soil the way old friends do, slow, deep, with all the time in the world. By morning, the keys had found their place in my purse, riding the lining like they were born there. I carried them the way you carry a small sleeping animal, carefully, aware of new breath. The maple outside the garden made slow coin noises in the breeze. Somewhere down the hall, a radio practiced forgiveness. Jess arrived with the Corolla and a list. She is a woman who makes lists the way other people make excuses. Today is for boring armor, she declared. Credit freeze, two-factor everything, safe deposit, passwords no poet could guess. We started at the bank. The teller recognized me. 30 years of deposits and 1,000 conversations about weather and births and funerals buys you a face in a system that otherwise prefers numbers. She introduced us to a manager named Liv, who wore her hair like a verdict and her glasses like a promise. Together, we added layers to my life. Text codes to logins, secondary passphrases, a secret question whose answer neither Daniel nor any stranger would guess, because it belonged to a story only Miguel and I shared. Liv printed a bright booklet, Your Digital Safety, like a bandage that had decided to be cheerful. Before we left, she lowered her voice. There's one more thing, she said. You have a safe deposit box on file. I stared at her, the way a person stares at a window in a dream. I haven't opened that since Miguel died. Want to check it? She asked. My palm found the toolbox key that lives in memory.
Cam had handed me a handful of obscure metal the day we changed the locks. I'd tossed it into the zip pocket of my purse without ceremony. One brass key had a shape I recognized in my bones. We followed Liv through a door that hummed with passwords and alarms into the small cold where people keep the things they're not ready to let go of. Inside the box were old proofs of life. Our marriage certificate, tied with string as if sentiment needed help. Miguel's union card, worn to velvet by a wallet. The title to a Toyota we sold to pay a semester's tuition that did not forgive us. At the bottom, in an envelope that had yellowed the way paper does when it has kept a secret too long, a letter addressed to me in Miguel's blocky hand. I leaned against the little shelf, because love is always heavier than it looks. His words were brief. He was not a man who trusted language to do what hands could do, but precise. He wrote about the house like other men write about daughters. He wrote about the maple, about the way its roots would go around what they had to and through what they could. He wrote, in his careful, unadorned way, that if the world ever told me to leave, I should check this box for the reminder that we built what we built to last longer than someone else's plan. Tucked behind the letter was a Xerox of a thing called a transfer on death deed, printed from a government website at some point in the last year of his life. It had highlights and a few notes in the margins, Miguel learning the language of paper late. It wasn't signed. That part mattered, but the notes mattered too. In the margin next to the line where a beneficiary would go, he'd written in pencil, "Not yet. Ruth decides." I slid the letter back into the envelope like a relic and put it near my heart. Liv pretended not to see the way I hid it there. "Anything else we can do?" she asked as the vault swallowed our box again. "Yes," I said. "Can we flag any attempt to add a signer to my accounts as a fraud risk requiring an in-person visit by me and only me?" "We already did," she said. "And it's possible I fell in love with every woman in that room for 5 pure seconds." By noon, we were at the county's small phone bank office where identity theft victims go to put freezes on the world. Jess typed while I answered questions that sounded like bad dates. Mother's maiden name, first apartment street, the color of a neighbor's dog. We called each bureau. We wrote down each confirmation number like spelling a prayer. We walked back into sunlight wearing more armor than we had in the morning, and less fear. Detective Ivy Ramos called while we were in the car. "Good news," she said, in a tone that implied she keeps it in a locked drawer. "The postal inspector has accepted the case. They'll serve a records request on the P.O. box tonight. Based on the preliminary info we had, it looks like the box wasn't in your son's name." I pressed the phone closer to my ear. "Then whose?" "Applicant used the name D. Alvarez," she said, "but the ID on file belongs to a Miss Elena Navarro. Same birth date as your daughter-in-law. We'll interview." "Thank you," I said, and the gratitude was a real thing, with weight and edges. Ivy didn't hang up. "One more item," she said. "You gave us a scan of the durable power of attorney your son circulated. The notary stamp on it belongs to a man who's had a commission for 15 years. The date on the certificate places him in Sacramento. His social media shows him at a conference that day, and his notary log, yes, we asked, does not show your name. He says he never met you. He did notarize a signature for a D. Alvarez that afternoon, documents related to a startup investment, nothing to do with you." The words arranged themselves slowly, like furniture in a new room. "So the acknowledgement is a forgery." "Looks like somebody slapped his stamp on after the fact," she said, "or scanned it from an old deed and pasted. We'll need a formal statement from you. You didn't appear before a notary for that document." "I didn't," I said, and felt the floor tilt and then steady. "I signed it in a car with the engine running." "We'll keep digging," she said. "In the meantime, heads up. When fraud gets cornered, fraud runs." We ate lunch at Rosita's because sometimes you need to sit at a counter that remembers the shape of your elbows. She put a plate of pot roast in front of me and a fork that felt like a tool in a world that wants women to use spoons. Jess showed her the freeze confirmations and the bank printouts in the notary news. Rosita whistled in a key that matched very few radios. Baby, if they forged a stamp, you're not just pushing back a son, you're pushing back a whole bad habit. Back at Maplewood, Janelle met me with a clipboard. 2 things, she said. First, I put your updated healthcare proxy on file, and we've added your do not disclose orders to the front of your chart in bold. Second, someone tried to come by around 10 with a mobile notary, said there were insurance papers you forgot to sign. I had security walk them out. Did they give a name? I asked. Janelle smiled a smile I would not like aimed at me. The notary had a name, she said. The man who stayed 6 feet back with his hands in his pockets had a baseball cap pulled low. People forget how tall their silhouettes are. I phoned Marcus with the notary news and the postal inspector update. He listened, his pencil scratching legal hieroglyphics into the pad that has begun to sound, in my mind, like armor being hammered. We'll amend our filings, he said. If the original POA acknowledgement is bogus, that's gasoline on our fire. We'll subpoena the paralegal who prepped it, the metadata on the PDF, the notary's original stamp impression sheet. And, Ruth, if Lena's name is on that P.O. Box application, her counsel will come looking for a ladder off this roof. The offer she left on your voicemail may not be the last. What would a ladder look like? I asked. A real stipend placed in trust you control, he said. A public apology letter. A dismissal with prejudice of any claims against you. A consent order with the court. A promise you don't have to buy belief with. Evelyn appeared in my doorway, eyebrows aloft like theater curtains. 3 women at bingo want to know if they should be freezing their credit, she called. I told them yes, and also to never sign anything, even if the pen is cute. We made a clinic out of the lounge. Jess set up chairs, Janelle brought a stack of brochures that turned out to be immediately useful. And I sat at a table with a sign that said, "Ask Ruth, not legal advice," which made me laugh so hard I forgot to almost cry. We walked our neighbors through freezes and 2-factor, through telling their banks what no looks like. Marcus emailed me a 1-page checklist with boxes you could actually check, and we passed it out like hymnals. Maya showed up with her notebook and her careful voice and listened to a dozen versions of the same story until the stories stopped being confessions and started being maps. At 4, an email arrived from Kara Benson, short and clean and worth framing. Per court order and owner instruction, listing remains Tom. Any inquiries are directed to owner's counsel. We will correct statements made to prospective buyers regarding HOA fees. She attached a screenshot of an email she sent to Ron Pritchard that read, with the crispness of a woman who knows how to schedule a regret, "Please cease representing that a homeowners association exists with fining authority. It does not. Remove all signage and flyers or face potential claims." Beneath, a single line, "CC Marcus Liu, ESQ." 5 minutes later, Mrs. Klein texted us a photograph of Ron standing in his driveway, pulling down his bylaws poster while a girl on a scooter watched, unimpressed. For a moment, my ribs made a sound like maybe I had laughter installed there again. Just before dinner, the beige phone blinked. Daniel. The message started with silence, and then his voice came in raw, without the performance he uses for men in suits. "I didn't know about the notary," he said. "Carr handled it, or his paralegal did. I know you won't believe me. I'm getting eaten alive here. Investors want their bridge back. Lena's parents are on me. The payroll is a firehouse. I wanted to do something that looked like control, and I did something I can't explain. I don't know how to stop losing." I saved it and stared at the machine as if it could explain suns. Somewhere on the other side of Maplewood, a television jury decided a handsome man was guilty of a thing everyone thought he was too handsome to do. The world can be very literal when it wants to. An hour later, Maya found me in the garden with a printout. "I pulled the notary stamp image from the Secretary of State's public records," she said, "and compared it to the one on your POA. The spacing is wrong and the commission number font doesn't match. Marcus will do it the formal way, but look. The differences were the sort you'd miss if you didn't love details. A comma where there shouldn't be, a microspace that gave away a paste. It's a funny thing how truth can be so small and yet end up weighing so much.
Evelyn came outside with tea, tuned her hearing aid like a conductor, and settled in. "Tell me the part where the paper loses," she said. "Not yet," I said, "but it's sweating." Night brought a visitor anyway. Not to my door. Janelle had trained the staff to deflect men with folders the way matadors deflect horns, but to the idea of me. A long text from a number I didn't know arrived at 9, polite and poisonous. "Mrs. Alvarez, as counsel for creative homestaging, I must inform you that although our lien has been released, our client expects compensation for demonstrable value conferred. As a courtesy, we would accept $5,000 to resolve." I forwarded it to Marcus and set my phone face down like you do when a fly insists on being a guest. He replied in 3 minutes. "Do not engage. Already handled." 15 minutes after that, another email landed. This one from the staging company's owner, apologizing profusely, blaming a junior associate, promising to review internal processes. The subject line read, "Please accept our sincere apologies." And for the first time in weeks, I felt the strange lightness of being believed by someone who had no reason to. On my nightstand, Miguel's letter sat under the book I pretend to read before sleep when really I listen to the building breathe. I took the letter out and read the line where he'd written, "Not yet. Ruth decides." The handwriting was a geometry only we had learned. Grief is a steadying weight when you carry it right. It keeps you from floating out of your own story. I wrote back, though there was nowhere to send it. "I'm deciding," I wrote, "not on a sale, not yet, on how to be your kind of stubborn." In the morning, Janelle knocked with a man in a polo behind her, whose badge said U.S. Postal Inspection Service in a font that did not argue with itself. He asked me to repeat my statement about the P.O. box, recorded it on a small device, and took a copy of my driver's license for his file. His questions were simple and uninterested in drama. Did you apply for the box? Did you authorize anyone to do so? Did you receive mail addressed to the box? He thanked me when we were done the way I thank waitresses for bringing coffee. After he left, Ivy called. "We interviewed Miss Navarro this morning," she said. "She admitted to renting the box. Says she thought she was streamlining. Says your son told her you don't do paperwork and that he had the documents handled. She's texting me screenshots. If they show a pattern, we may refer forgery for charging." I leaned against the dresser so I wouldn't lean against a person. "What happens now?" "Same thing that was happening yesterday," she said, "only with more paper with teeth." After lunch, an email from Carr arrived, couched in lawyer velvet, offering what Marcus had predicted: a stipend placed in trust, fees paid, an apology that managed to say sorry while refusing to admit guilt, and a promise never to touch my accounts again. It ended with a sentence so carefully balanced it could have been carved on a courthouse. In exchange, Miss Alvarez will execute a deed to the Maple Street property on a mutually agreeable timeline. Marcus sent it to me with 3 words, "Your call, Ruth." I printed it and took it to the garden. The maple was busy translating wind into language. Evelyn sat beside me and didn't ask. Maya stood, not taking notes for once, hands in pockets like a friend who knows that pockets can be prayer. I laid the paper flat on my lap. There was a time when this would have sounded like rescue, money, apology, relief. I could stop being a news item. I could stop being a bad dream in my son's house. I could trade my keys for quiet.
I thought of the notary who wasn't there, and the stamp that pretended to be. I thought of the P.O. box that wore my name, and the ID that didn't. I thought of Lena's voice when it remembered salt. I thought of my maple, the one at home and the one here, and how roots do not negotiate with sidewalks. They go under, they go around. They lift concrete with a patient's muscles envy. "Not yet," I said, aloud, to no one and everyone. "Ruth decides." I wrote my answer in a new letter and had Jess drive me to Marcus's office, because some words should not be emailed. I am willing to discuss a sale I oversee, on my timeline, after your client publicly withdraws any claim he has to speak for me, releases all liens claims, pays all fees, and issues a statement acknowledging I revoked the POA and that any representation to the contrary was inaccurate. The deal will include a clause requiring my written approval of all public statements, and an admission that my capacity was never at issue. I will not agree to non-disparagement that gags me from advising other women. I added a final line because sentences feel stronger when their last words are unafraid. No deed without these terms. Marcus read it once, then again slower, then looked at me like a man grateful for a job worth staying late to finish. "I'll send it," he said. "No counter-signature unless it comes back with your sentences intact." On the drive back, the light had that warm, late-day angle that turns even bad paint kind. We passed a row of maples whose leaves were just thinking about surrender. Jess rolled down the window and let air move across a day that had been all paper and rooms. At Maplewood, Janelle had taped a flyer to the lounge corkboard. "Know your papers night, Sunday, 6 p.m. Bring questions, bring cookies." I added a line in my diner penmanship. "Bring your spine, we've got pens." Before bed, I took the photograph of Daniel at 10 off the corkboard, held it in both hands, and told him the truth I want him to grow into. "You are not your worst day," I said to a boy who still believes me, "but you don't get to make mine." I pinned the photo back up and slid Miguel's letter under my pillow like a superstition that earns its keep. The keys in my purse made their small, significant sound when I set the bag on the chair. Somewhere, a TV applauded something hollow. The maple on the lawn wrote leaf shadows on my ceiling in a language I'm finally learning. There will be judges and orders and offers, and more days full of men who want to rename what happened to me into something that doesn't stain their ties. There will be neighbors who bring foil-covered mercy, and girls on scooters who watch men take down bad signs. There will be letters that arrive with weight, and others that leave me lighter. There will be my son, who may yet figure out how to stop losing by stopping. I turned out the light. In the dark, I could feel sap moving, paper drying, ink setting. Somewhere in a record book whose pages are glass, my no had become a line the city agreed to read. And under that, steadier than stamps, louder than cologne, more honest than apologies written with gloves on, the maple kept doing what it learned the first year it pushed a root through soil. It held. At noon, my name went up. At midnight, they brought a chainsaw. By 11:59, the joint statement had been fought over like a treaty, verbs sharpened, nouns weighed, one adjective given a funeral. Marcus sent me the final at 11:57 with a single line, "Your words or no deal." They chose your words. I stood in Maplewood's lounge with Evelyn and Jess and Janelle, shoulder to shoulder with women who know the price of a sentence, and watched the brokerage's website refresh. There it was, black on white where houses usually glow. We regret any confusion arising from the process of preparing Miss Alvarez's home for sale. We respect her decision to retain ownership and acknowledge her revocation of a previously executed power of attorney. Miss Alvarez remains fully capable of managing her affairs. We further announce a donation to the Maplewood Legal Aid Clinic in memory of Nai Lu. The phrase sat in the middle like a jewel. Fully capable. I'd worn competence all my life like work clothes. Today, the county ironed it for me. Phones began to vibrate with a politeness that bordered on applause. Kara texted a screen recording of the statement as it went live. Maya sent a heart that looked like it learned boundaries. Liv from the bank wrote, "Tell me if you want it framed." Rosita arrived with a tray of empanadas as if public acknowledgement required carbs. Janelle, who never cries at the right time, cried. "Paper spine," Evelyn said, tapping the screen. "See, you can stretch on it." By 1:30, the clinic's inbox pinged with the donation confirmation. Janelle printed it and taped it next to the blue flyer. A nurse from the South Wing said, "Marcus's grandmother," like a blessing. And for a minute, the lounge felt like church done correctly. No apologies, just gratitude. The other half of the day bounced like a bad check. A push alert from a business blog announced a leadership transition at Carr & Sloan. The paralegals LinkedIn changed status to seeking new opportunities, which is the internet's way of putting a box on a desk. ADA Hale emailed Marcus to confirm that devices had been imaged, logs secured. The sharks didn't stop circling because the water learned my name, they turned because the tide did. At 3, a text from Daniel. I saw it. Congratulations. Then another 5 minutes later, as if he had learned to add the part that mattered. I'm sorry. No punctuation at the end, which is either humility or habit. Marcus called at 4. Sloan blinked, he said. He stopped calling buyers and title officers. The firm agreed to hold their tongues in exchange for not being named in any press. I didn't threaten them with press, I said. You didn't, he said. Noise carries anyway. We spent the afternoon doing the boring victory things that save a life from becoming a headline. I signed the landscape preservation covenant with the city arborist. She explained root barriers like a person teaching you where to place your feet in a new dance. We added a second lock to the side gate and a motion sensor that made the porch light behave like a watchdog. Jess printed copies of the statement and slipped one behind the photo of Daniel at 10 on my corkboard, so that when I looked at the boy, I also saw the words calling his mother what she had always been. Dinner tasted better than usual because relief adds seasoning. Evelyn ate her green beans like a victor picking confetti out of her hair. On the TV, a panel of faces argued about inflation, in voices that made money sound like a person you could scold into returning home. I washed the plate myself, because some acts feel like insisting on being alive. The sky went the color of gratitude, then the color of mercy, then the color that comes before trouble. I slept hard enough to forget where I was until the phone's ring shook the room open.
Jess, breathless. Miss Ruth, I'm so sorry. Neighbors app is lighting up. There's a truck at your place. No markings. 2 guys. Chainsaw. They're saying they have an order to take the maple down for hazard mitigation tonight. Call the police, I said. Put them on speaker. I'm coming. Janelle met me in the hall with keys and the face she uses for fires. You are not going alone, she said. Evelyn appeared already dressed, lips a firm line, cardigan buttoned like armor. Women of a certain age, she announced, make excellent witnesses. We woke Cam with a text. She replied with a thumbs up and a promise to meet us there. Marcus answered on the second ring, no sleep in his voice. I'll call the arborist, he said, and Hale. On Maple Street, the lights made the street look like a stage no one had ordered. A box truck idled in front of my house, with its hazards blinking the way liars blink. 2 men in hoodies argued with Mrs. Klein, who had planted herself on the curb in a robe and slippers with a ladle in her hand like a scepter. The maple's canopy moved gently, unbothered by the noise. Evening, I said, and the word came out like a brick set carefully on a table. State your work order. The taller one waved a clipboard with the casual arrogance of paper used as a mask. Emergency removal, he said. Priority hazard for city. Your neighbor filed the complaint. He gestured his chin at Ron's dark house, which looked like a bakery after a raid, emptied of ingredients, full of regret. The city arborist signed a preservation covenant at noon, I said. Any work requires her authorization. Who's your supervisor? The shorter one shrugged with his mouth. Dispatch told us, we're just following orders. Stalin said that, Evelyn murmured. It didn't go well. Sirens softened the edges of the night and then announced themselves in blue. A patrol car slid to the curb. The young officer who stepped out looked like he had a mother who had taught him to be polite to women who are finished being polite. Evening, folks, he said. What's the emergency? Men with a chainsaw and a forged order, I said, and handed him my copy of the covenant like a passport. He read it, glanced at the clipboard, and squinted. Your order number's missing a digit, he told the taller man. And we don't schedule midnight canopy reductions. The taller man tried a different key in the same lock. We got a call. We're hourly. If we show up and the tree comes down in the morning anyway, we don't get paid. "Who sent you?" Marcus asked from my speakerphone, voice cool, alive. "Give a name, please, so we can include it in the report." The shorter one took a step back, the way a person does when a floor turns out to be a trapdoor. "Guy named Garrick," he muttered. "Said he was authorized by the owner's son, paid cash deposit." The officer looked at me, then at the truck, then at the men. "Turn it off," he said of the chainsaw, "and don't start it again." He took their IDs. "You're not city, you're not licensed here. You're gonna wait while I call this in." A second cruiser arrived. Cam materialized at my elbow like a spell with steel toes. The city arborist's truck pulled up 10 minutes later, her ponytail tight, clipboard ready. She walked straight to the maple, rested a palm to bark like a priest, then turned to the men with a smile that did not reach any part of her body tasked with kindness. "Leave," she said, "or take a citation and a court date with you." They left. Not in a hurry, because pride is a disease. But they left. Ron's porch light snapped on. He stepped out in sweatpants and innocence. "What's all this?" he asked, voice pitched high with the hope of not being implicated. "Neighborhood watch," Mrs. Klein said, sweetly, brandishing her ladle.
The officer handed me a copy of his report. "You want to make a formal statement?" he asked. I nodded. He took it. He eyed the truck as it turned the corner and shook his head. "Been a long time since someone tried to cut down a tree at midnight." "Desperation is loud," the arborist said. "Roots are patient." I stood under the canopy and tilted my head back until my neck reminded me I was a woman, not a streetlight. The stars, what little the city still allows, had the decency to show up. The maple, which had almost become an affidavit, returned to being a tree. "Back to bed," Evelyn announced, authoritative. "Justice requires sleep." When we returned to Maplewood, the building breathed the soft breath of people who believed they were safe because it was dark and someone else was awake. Janelle put a pot of coffee on even though it was after 1. "For shock," she said, "and stories." My phone blinked when I set my purse down. "Daniel, 12:42 a.m. I let it play. "I didn't send them," he said, and I believed him, which is not the same as forgiving. "But I know who did. Garrick doesn't miss. He thinks if the tree goes, you'll give up the house. He thinks pressure is a plan. I told him to stop. He didn't. I'm sorry. I'll deal with it." I saved it and forwarded it to Marcus and Hale and the arborist. CC, Jess, BC, my anger. Marcus replied with a single word, "Documented." Hale's came next. "Thanks. We'll be paying Mr. Sloan a morning visit." I pictured a knock that sounded like the end of a season. Sleep came back the way a cat returns after you pretend you weren't worried. Aloof, with dignity, then generous. When morning arrived, it brought newspapers that still bother to be paper, with the statement on page 2 under a headline that managed to be accurate without being poetic. Maya's story slid into my inbox at 9. A tree they tried to take at midnight. And I read it with the slow reverence anyone reserves for words that get the point without stabbing. Marcus called just after 10. "Sloan has counsel," he said. "He's turning himself inside out to call the chainsaw stunt a misunderstanding." Hale is unimpressed. The officer's body cam footage helps, so does Jess's. "I didn't want my life to be a documentary," I said. "It's not," he said. "It's a deposition with a happier third act." We met at the house at noon to sign the last page of the landscape covenant, because I wanted to do it in the shade of the thing it protected. The arborist, still in boots, witnessed. The city clerk, a woman with serious glasses and a joy problem, stamped. Cam adjusted the side gate, and we replaced the keypad with an old-fashioned deadbolt that turned with satisfying resistance. Kara stopped by on her way to an appointment with a bouquet that looked like gratitude and an envelope that looked like decency. "For you," she said. Inside, a letter typed on letterhead that began, "To whom it may concern," and ended, "We regret our role." It was the kind of apology that will never be printed above the fold, but may someday stand between a woman like me and a man like my son in the exact moment the pen would otherwise slip. "Keep your job," I told her, because she cared, and that is rare enough to deserve permission.
She laughed like a person who had not slept, and then left to sell a house that belonged to someone who wanted to sell it. On the way back, Jess drove slow, as if speed could wrinkle a day. We passed Ron's house where no posters hung, and a girl on a scooter doing figure eights like defiance in chalk. Mrs. Klein waved from her porch, where she had installed herself like a monument to the right kind of stubborn. The street looked like ordinary again, which is the miracle you don't notice until you've watched a chainsaw leave your curb.
Back in my room, I took the printed statement and slid it behind Miguel's letter in the safe deposit photocopy. Fully capable, pressed against not yet, Ruth decides. 2 phrases, 1 spine. I pinned the photo Jess had taken at 1:30 a.m., 3 women and a cop and a city arborist under a maple that refused to come down. We looked ridiculous and holy. Near dinner, the beige phone blinked. Daniel, again, smaller somehow. They pulled the bridge, he said. It's over. I'm talking to a lawyer, a different kind. I'll pay the clinic back for the hours they didn't bill you. I don't know if that helps. I want it to. I sat on the bed and practiced the sentence I had been saving for a decade. I love you and I will not fix you. I didn't call him back. Not yet. Ruth decides. That night, Maplewood hosted an awkward, perfect thing. The clinic put up a paper sign that said, "Thank you, Nay," in handwriting that had learned to be proud. Marcus stood by the cookie table with his hands in his pockets, like a man whose grief has found a job. Janelle held up the donation letter for the room to see. People clapped like a choir. Evelyn squeezed my hand so hard my bones remembered childhood. Maya didn't take notes, she watched. Afterwards, when the room had thinned to the people who clean and the people who need to be cleaned, I went out to the garden and stood under our smaller maple. The lawn carried the day in the way a body carries a bruise, tender, honest. The sunflower had lost 2 more petals and looked none the lesser for it. I touched the bark and closed my eyes and catalogued what the chapter had added to the long book. A sentence that said my name out loud, a truck that left, a boy who might yet learn to end sentences with periods and not demands. Tomorrow, the preliminary injunction would grow teeth or be replaced by a consent order that did the same job faster. Tomorrow, the stipends and fees would move out of adjectives and into accounts. Tomorrow, the arborist would schedule a root barrier installation, and I would stand by with lemonade like a senator. Tomorrow, I might call my son and say, "I heard your voice. Thank you for letting the tree live." Tomorrow, the sharks would find a deeper bay. The binder would demand answers I had already given. And women with clipboards would show up on time the way salvation does when it has good shoes. For now, I turned the key in the lock of my room, a sound that has become a small private prayer, and lay down on the quilt that remembers more than it tells. Somewhere, a TV applauded too long. Somewhere, a man in a polo shirt threw away a forged clipboard. Somewhere, in the official memory of the city, a line nested under my name, Tree Preservation Covenant recorded. And under that line, under all of them, something older did a thwork. Sap moving, roots talking, a woman learning the pleasure of living inside terms you can't edit. The court sent us to a building that looked like a dentist and called itself Harbor ADR. The lobby had soft chairs, a silent fountain, and a bowl of mints designed to make compromise smell like wintergreen. A receptionist with the calm of an air traffic controller gave everyone pens that wrote too smoothly, as if ink could persuade bone. 2 rules, Marcus said in the elevator, smoothing the edge of a manila folder. You can walk at any time, and every yes buys you something real. What does no buy? I asked. Everything else, he said. Our mediator was a retired judge named Dorothy Shepard. Silver hair, flat shoes, the posture of a woman who knows the weight of a gavel without needing to pick it up. She shook my hand, shook Daniel's, looked briefly at Lena like a doctor assessing whether a patient was here willingly, and took her seat at the head of a small, round table that had no sides to hide behind.
"This is confidential," she said, eyes on everyone at once. "We will speak in sentences, not weapons. We will assume dignity until proven otherwise. If anyone raises their voice, you will be invited to lower it in the hall." I liked her. I like people who warn you and then keep their promises. Daniel arrived with a new lawyer, Pruitt, crisp and competent, the way briefcases imagine themselves.
Carr was not in the room, which was a mercy for the carpet. Lena trailed close, sunglasses off this time, as if daylight had finally found her. Garrick tried to follow them in with a smile he had likely purchased at a seminar. Judge Shepard held up a palm. "This room is for parties," she said. "You are noise. Wait outside." He started to speak, thought better, and disappeared into a hallway plant. Judge Shepard passed around a sheet labeled Ground Rules and another labeled Agenda, as if order were furniture you could assemble with enough hex keys. "Petitioner," she said, a polite term for the woman with her name on the deed. Marcus laid out the spine, the revocation, the TRO, the arborist's covenant, the donation already made, the joint statement already published. "We are willing to discuss a sale on petitioner's timeline," he said, "after performance of specific conditions. Stipend trust funded, fees paid, apology published, and an acknowledgement that Miss Alvarez's capacity was never at issue. We will not discuss any non-disparagement that silences her from advising others. We will not cut the tree." Respondent, Judge Shepard nodded to Pruitt. "Miss Alvarez's son is attempting to prevent the public and ongoing humiliation of a family matter," Pruitt said. "He is willing to concede control of all processes to Miss Alvarez, to accept a standstill, and to fund a stipend trust. He would like a sale within 6 months and a joint statement avoiding language of blame." "Humiliation is not a legal theory," Judge Shepard said mildly. "It's a feeling. We will talk about feelings when we need to, and facts when we must." She turned to me. "Miss Alvarez, what do you want?" "A quiet life that belongs to me," I said. "A house that doesn't lie about who owns it. A son who understands the difference between help and theft." "Specifics?" she asked. "The kind of woman who knows that peace needs bullet points." "Money I can live on without anyone holding the receipt," I said. "Fees paid. The clinic endowed for a while, with the name on the blue flyer. A public sentence with my name where it belongs, and the tree stays." She tapped her pen. "Mr. Alvarez?" Daniel swallowed. He had never looked so much like a man who missed cereal. "I want to not be sued from 6 directions," he said. "I want investors to stop calling me at 3 a.m. I want to know my mother will be taken care of because I blew up the only bridge I thought I had." "That," Judge Shepard said, "is a sentence I can work with." She moved us to caucus, private meetings, 2 adjoining rooms, a box of tissues positioned with a decorator's precision. In ours, she listened, chin propped on fist, as Marcus and I drew lines and then painted them in. "Do you want to sell?" she asked me when the legal parts were stacked. "Not yet," I said. "I want the world to stop knocking. Then I want to decide." "And your son?" she asked. "What do you want for him?" "For him, a mirror and a clock." I thought of Miguel's letter. I thought of Daniel at 10 and at 32. I want him to know what he did. I want him to stop when stopping is the only skill left. She nodded, and then left to sit with Daniel. When she returned, she had the look of someone who had walked through a room full of sharp edges and taken notes.
"He is frightened," she said. "Fear makes fools of people. He wants you to promise that you'll consider a sale in 6 months. He is prepared to sign a consent order now, standing injunction against acting for you, contacting you outside counsel, touching your mail, or representing to anyone that he has authority. He will fund the stipend, pay fees, agree to the clinic gift, and accept the landscape covenant." She paused. "He balks at the word apology. He wants regret. He balks at fully capable, though the joint statement already uses it." "Then he can balk in a smaller room," I said. "I'm not downgrading a sentence to protect a man's idea of himself. I will not sell my nouns." It took all afternoon in little circles. Judge Shepard padded back and forth, ferrying offers like messages through a siege. Pruitt sharpened and softened. Marcus remained a metronome. I learned how much coffee a human being can drink without confessing to crimes. In the 3rd round, Shepard asked if Lena would join our caucus. Lena took the chair like a woman signing a book she did not write. Up close, without citrus or gloss, she looked her age. Too young to know how expensive the wrong kind of hunger can be.
I rented the P.O. box, she said before anyone asked. I did it. I thought it made paperwork easier. It was wrong. I am telling the DA that. Why did you call men to cut down my tree at midnight? I asked. Because women are allowed to be surgical when they've paid the copay. Her face went still, like a surface learning about wind. I didn't, she said quietly. Garrick did. He told the guys I authorized it. He believes pressure gets results. And you? I said. I believe I made myself small to be next to something that looked like power, she said. I am trying to be different. She slid a ring onto the table. A slim band, a whisper of stones. I am leaving, she said. Not because of you, because of what I did next to him. Her eyes flicked toward the wall that separated us from Daniel. I already told him. Judge Shepard watched her, then watched me, the way you watch a bridge you hope can hold. Any interest in restorative terms, she asked me. Something that asks him to do more than pay and shut up. I thought of the clinic, of the lounge with cookies and checklists, of the woman who had written down Evelyn's line about lasagna like scripture. He can audit the clinic's class, I said, surprising myself. He can sit in the back and hear what help looks like. He doesn't get to teach, he gets to listen. And he writes a check that keeps the lights on there quietly every month. Fair, Shepard said. He's not going to love it. He doesn't have to, I said. He just has to do it. We reconvened after sunset in the main room, everyone looking like the day had chewed and returned them. Judge Shepard read a term sheet out loud with the clarity of a bedtime story that has earned its ending. Permanent consent order, no conservatorship talk, fees paid, stipend trust funded within 10 business days, landscape covenant honored, clinic donation made, acknowledgement published and archived, no contact outside counsel, audit the clinic, monthly support, 6 months of peace before any sale conversation. She paused on the sentence that mattered most to me. The statement shall include, Ms. Alvarez remains fully capable of managing her affairs. Pruitt's pen moved. We can accept all but the clinic audit, she said. My client believes that's punitive. It's educational, Judge Shepard said. Punitive is what happens when the ADA reads an indictment. Pruitt leaned over to Daniel. He whispered something that forced him to swallow pride like a pill you forgot requires food. He nodded. Once. I'll go, he said, voice raw at the edges. Then we have a partial agreement, Shepard said, relief appearing in her posture and then politely removing itself. We will draft a consent order tonight. Counsel will handle funding and filings. The sale conversation, if any, resumes in 6 months and not a day earlier unless Miss Alvarez invites it. We began to rise when Pruitt added, There's one thing more. Mr. Alvarez would like time with his mother. 5 minutes, in the hall. Counsel can stand nearby. 2 minutes, I said, in a room with lights. We stood by a vending machine that pretended to be generous. Marcus and Pruitt lingered at a polite distance, the way guards do at museums, present, pretending not to be. Daniel looked like men do at the end of an ocean, salted, smaller, real. I'm sorry, he said, and it was not the words that mattered, but the way his throat had learned them. I don't know how to refund it all. You can't, I said. That's not how time works. You can fix less than you broke, and more than you think. He nodded, wiped a hand across his mouth like a boy who doesn't want his face to betray him. Could I? He stopped, changed tenses, tried again. Someday, could I come to the house for dinner? Someday, I said, if you bring a screwdriver. The pantry hinge squeaks. And you leave when I yawn. He laughed, surprised at the sound, then looked at the floor. I miss Dad, he said. I do too, I said. When you sit in the back of the clinic, you'll hear women who miss men and still learn to breathe. Try to hear them. We signed nothing that night. Judge Shepard's clerk would send drafts in the morning. But the bones had been set. Sometimes that is all a body can ask. Back at Maplewood, the lounge looked like a ship after passengers disembark. Chairs skewed, a stray cup, the echo of voices deciding they had lived. Janelle poured something that looked like tea and tasted like victory. Evelyn put her feet up on the ottoman with the insolence of queens. Jess flopped into a chair like relief had finally found a teenager's spine. Report, Evelyn said. Consent order, I said. No corners. Maya texted, how did it feel? I wrote back, like a locksmith for sentences. She sent back a single line from her last piece. Paper doesn't forgive. People sometimes do. Morning brought drafts that read like the night had listened. Marcus bedlined where the verbs tried to retreat. Pruitt accepted most of them without blood. By noon, ADA Hale emailed Marcus an attachment. Complaint filed. Forgery of notarial act, attempted interference with public property, aiding and abetting. The names under the counts were not mine. Progress, Marcus said, standing in my doorway with the kind of smile men wear when they only leased the win. In the afternoon, the city clerk returned our recorded covenant stamped in a font that makes promises real. I could a copy behind the photo of Daniel at 10. Paper ghosting boy, boy ghosting paper. The beige phone blinked. There was a message from Liv at the bank confirming the trust account had been opened and funded. "You have a spine, Miss Alvarez," she said, voice warm. "We just added cartilage." At dusk, I went to the house with Jess and stood in the kitchen to see if the light still remembered how to strike the counter at the right angle. It did. We ate empanadas from Rosita out of a paper bag, leaning against the island like fugitives who had decided to stop running. I opened Miguel's toolbox for the first time in weeks and touched each thing as if it could confirm its name. Crescent wrench, Phillips, tape measure that snapped back like a joke. We found the pantry hinge that squeaked, and I dabbed it with oil. Jess worked the door back and forth until it sighed like an apology. "Moving back?" she asked, gentle, the way you ask a bird if it intends to reconsider the sky. "Maybe," I said, "after the house has forgiven me for leaving."
We stepped into the yard. The maple sifted light onto our faces, the way it has since it learned to throw shade for children and men with cold beer and women who earned their rest. I read the covenant like a bedtime story to Bark. "You stay," I told it. "I stay too. Not yet, but soon." On the porch, the door made the little noise it makes when you lock it correctly, twice, decisive, almost smug. I slid the key into my pocket and felt its small, patient weight. Back at Maplewood, I pinned a new card on the lounge corkboard. Clinic audit. Seats in the back. Listening required. Under it, in diner penmanship, I wrote, "Screwdrivers provided." Before sleep, I took out Miguel's letter and read the margin note again. Not yet. Ruth decides. And realized it had ripened into something else. Not yet. Ruth decides when. The when might be 6 months, it might be spring, it might be a day when the light lands on the table and my hands remember where the napkins go. It would not be tonight. It would not be decided by men with forged stamps or midnight trucks. The building exhaled the easy breath of a place that has learned your name. Somewhere, a nurse tucked a blanket under an elbow with a kindness that does not need a witness. Somewhere, a man in a suit discovered that apology has a keyboard he does not play. Somewhere, a judge put her pen in a drawer and let evening be evening. I turned out the light. The maple from 2 blocks away leaned its shadow into my room because trees like to break rules when they're doing it for the right reasons. The key in my purse clicked against the leather like a metronome. I counted. Not sheep, not locks, but days of my choosing stacked neatly in front of me, ready for a woman who had learned what a sentence can open when it's written exactly and only by her. The consent order arrived the way weather changes, quiet, signature blue, inevitable. Marcus laid it on the table in the Maplewood lounge like a priest placing a relic. Stipends and fees funded, no contact outside counsel, no conservatorship petitions. The landscape covenant folded into the bones of the case as if trees could be parties to lawsuits. The judge had signed with a pen that did not wobble. The clerk's stamp made its little thunder. Someone in the south wing clapped because Janelle cannot keep good news inside her hands. Cartilage, Liv from the bank called it when she phoned to confirm the trust account was funded. Spine's there. We made it easier to move. Outside, the maple made coins of the morning. Inside, the beige phone blinked like a tired lighthouse and then went still. Carr disappeared from the story the way a villain does when he remembers he owes taxes. ADA Hale moved to a different page. The sharks circled larger water. I made oatmeal because after you install a lock on your life, blood sugar is a good idea.
The clinic audit happened on a Wednesday evening that smelled like copier heat and cookies. We set up chairs in rows, listening required on a paper sign. The room filled with walkers and daughters and the polite, prickly hope of men who aren't sure if they're the lesson or the audience. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early, alone, sat in the back, and folded his hands in a way his father used to when he doubted his mouth. Maya didn't take notes. She stood near the coffee urn and became furniture. Marcus leaned on the door jamb, a man who will always prefer a hallway to a spotlight. Judge Shepard sent a bouquet and a card. Peace is a verb. Evelyn wore a cardigan that looked like tenure. Other clinics came on Saturday. Much olive oil pizza and lemon juice. We set up chairs in rows, listening required on a paper sign. The room filled with walkers and daughters and the polite, prickly hope of men who aren't sure if they're the lesson or the audience. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early, alone, sat in the back, and folded his hands in a way his father used to when he doubted his mouth. Maya didn't take notes. She stood near the coffee urn and became furniture. Marcus leaned on the door jamb, a man who will always prefer a hallway to a spotlight. Judge Shepard sent a bouquet and a card. Peace is a verb. Evelyn wore a cardigan that looked like tenure. We started small. Janelle explained powers of attorney as if they were kitchen tools, useful when you choose them, dangerous in the wrong hands. I walked the room through revocation and recording and the form you file when a clerk tries to tell you you're tired. We passed out pens that wrote the truth without smearing. A woman with a voice like honey asked if she had to put her grandson on her deed to thank him for painting her porch. No, I said, you can pay him in lasagna. A man in a baseball cap said his son borrowed his EBT card. Is that theft if he promises to pay me back? He asked, the way men ask when they are trying to find a word they think might ruin a family dinner. It is, I said gently, and it's love to say so while you still have a grocery budget. Then a woman with keys sewn into the inside of her purse asked if an apology could be notarized. The room laughed and sighed and made the kind of noise people make when you've named a thing they've been feeding in the backyard like a stray. I saw Daniel's jaw move. I saw him look anywhere but at me. When it ended, people lingered to say thank you or argue with the air. Daniel stayed seated until the room thinned to chairs and wrappers. Then he stood and walked the length of it like a swimmer counting tiles. I'm Daniel, he said to the front of the room, as if the room needed an introduction to gravity. He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at the blue flyer with 9i on it and at the whiteboard that still held the verbs I'd written in fat marker. I'm here to listen. I'm here because I forgot my mother was a person and I put a plan where her name should be. I can't return what I took. I can pay, I can stop, I can... He swallowed. I can sit in the back. No one clapped. It wasn't that kind of speech. He sat. He stayed. He helped stack chairs, badly, the way men do when they are learning to be useful. The next morning, Marcus and I met a trust officer named Wren in a conference room where the walls were the color of caution and the coffee was strong enough to confess to murder. We drafted a living trust with a name that wore both our names properly, the Ruth and Miguel Alvarez Living Trust. And we made the house a beneficiary of my stubbornness. I named the bank as successor trustee so no one with my face could accidentally mistake love for paperwork. I kept my keys, I kept my title. We added a pour-over will because death is a clerk who requires every form filed twice. What about after? Wren asked gently, tapping her pen where the word residuary sat like a pot waiting for a stew. Who gets the house eventually? Miguel's letter rustled in my purse like a leaf. Not yet. Ruth decides. The phrase had been an umbrella. It was becoming a map. Someday I want Daniel to have a shot at it, I said, but not as a test, as a graduation. And if he doesn't, I want the clinic to have a fund that allows someone to say no without counting their stamps. 2 paths, Wren said. We can write conditional bequests with triggers, a checklist a judge would swallow without choking. Or we can write a letter of wishes to the trustee, with your voice all over it, reminding them what the money is supposed to feel like. I don't want a judge guessing what love should look like, I said. Letter of wishes, with nouns that can stand in court if they have to. We drafted it there, me dictating, Wren translating, Marcus polishing. If Daniel has 2 consecutive years of filing his taxes on time, no pending lawsuits in his own name, no liens recorded against him, sustained work that buys groceries and not applause, and written proof of monthly support to the clinic that kept his mother from being erased, then the trustee may sell the house to him for a fair price with a covenant that binds the maple to the future. If not, the house is sold and the proceeds fund the Nine-Eye Clinic endowment, with a plaque that says what I mean, fully capable was true. I added one more line, because sentences hold better when they end on the right word. In all cases, no one may cut down the tree for convenience. Wren smiled without judgment. We can't enforce poetry, she said, but we can enforce that. The arborist returned to install the root barrier on a Saturday that smelled like damp new earth and sweat. Jess filmed the whole thing like a music video for patients. We watched men dig carefully along the sidewalk, slide a black panel between soil and concrete like a bookmark, then tamp everything back into a tidy truce. The maple did not complain. It rained that night the way it rains when a city wants to apologize. Soft, thorough, roof patter that remembers lullabies. We tried a small party under the canopy the following week. Nothing fancy, just lemonade and empanadas and folding chairs arranged the way neighbors like to tell the news. The girl on the scooter brought her grandmother, who brought a cake in a pan that's older than most apologies. Ron came, astonishing himself, carrying a plate of brownies that tasted like a man making a first attempt at humility. He stood in the shade and said, "I'm sorry," to no one particular and to everyone, and a few people nodded, because sincere is a language you recognize even when the grammar is rough. Kara swung by after an open house with tulips and a handshake. The city arborist toasted the barrier like a godmother with steel-toed boots. Maya balanced a paper plate on her notebook and failed to write a single sentence, which is the kind of failure a woman should experience more often. Ada Hale did not attend, which was correct, but he sent a note on county letterhead that said, "Keep watering what worked," and attached a photocopy of a filed complaint with certain names blacked out, the way the future sometimes lets you peek. Daniel came at the end, late on purpose, wearing a sweater that did not try to be a suit. He went straight to the pantry and oiled the hinge without being asked. He wiped his hands on a rag the way his father used to, folded it, and set it on the counter. When he stepped onto the porch, he nodded at Mrs. Klein like a man paying a debt, and then stood 10 feet away from me until I waved him closer. "We made a trust," I said, "because men like information they can fold." "I heard," he said. "Pruitt said you wrote a letter to go with it. She said it was kind." "It's accurate," I said. "Kindness is when accuracy wears a clean shirt." He laughed without liking himself for it. "I have a job again," he said, almost apologetically. "Not a founder job, a job. Salary small, work big." "Good," I said. "Boredom is a skill." He looked at the tree. "I didn't realize how much of this started because of that." "It started because of a sentence," I said. "A forged one, a bad one, a quiet one. The tree was just where we noticed ourselves." When the paper plates were in the bin and the folding chairs clacked back into their skinny selves, I stood in the yard and watched the lights coming on in other houses. The street sounded like relief. The maple let go of a single leaf, and I caught it without trying. It felt like paper without teeth. That night, the beige phone blinked again with a different kind of news. Liv called to confirm the stipend landed. Wren emailed to say the trust was recorded. Marcus forwarded an order from the court entering our consent as if it had always been the law, because that is how law likes to flatter itself. Then Maya sent a message that made my hands forget what they were doing. Tip just came in. Garrick's fund is a shell. He's being looked at by the AG for elder financial abuse in 3 other cases. Want to talk on background? No names yet, but this is bigger. I stared at the words until they stopped shaking. Bigger is a word that steals sleep for sport. I wrote back, "After breakfast, not tonight. I am learning to protect the hours in which my ribs are not armor." Evelyn knocked like a woman who knows every door eventually opens twice. "Tea," she said, setting one mug down. "Also, you're glowing." "It's the root barrier," I said. "I'm now partially composed of high-density polyethylene." She laughed and then turned her face toward the window the way people do when they're trying to let a friend have a private moment without leaving the room. "When are you going to sleep at the house?" she asked, not idly. "Soon," I said, "after the ink dries, after my hands remember what to do with the quiet." "Take the quilt," she said. "Houses forgive faster when you show up with your softest thing." The first night back wasn't heroic. I carried a small bag, not a story. I made the bed, I turned on a lamp, and then the hall light, and then, for good measure, the porch. I walked the rooms like a woman counting exits even though she installed the locks herself. The pantry hinge sighed, obedient. The refrigerator hummed like a polite relative. Every room still knew my name. I slept the way a person does when the pillows remember her head. The house moved as houses do, the pop of a settling joist, the whisper of a vent remembering dust, the distant, dignified rumors of a city that prefers its crimes in daylight. At 3 a.m., I woke to a noise that was not the house. A muffled knock, then another, not the door, not the glass, soft, insistent. I took the flashlight from the drawer, the one that belonged to Miguel and hates to be dramatic, and padded down the hall in socks. The knock came again, low, regular, a sound like someone tapping their ring against wood, but with patience, not threat. In the kitchen, I stopped. The sound resolved itself into something my body recognized before my mind. A branch at the window, brushing, a fingertip on a drum. I raised the blind 2 inches, and the maple answered in silhouette, a limb I hadn't noticed reaching close enough to greet the glass. "Hello," it said, in a language older than injunctions. I put my palm against the pane, and it matched me, leaf to hand, the way a parent and child do in hospital rooms and airports, and all the other thresholds where bodies ask permission to keep going. When morning came, it brought coffee and sunlight, and the almost ridiculous pleasure of my own spoon in my own drawer. It brought an email from Ren confirming the letter of wishes had been scanned into a system that will remember me when my own bones forget. It brought a text from Daniel, "I'm at the clinic," in the back. It brought a note from ADA Hale that simply said, "We took his ring. No more midnight arborists." It brought a headline in the Beacon that did not use my name, and yet felt mine. "Help is not a deed." It also brought a new kind of quiet, the kind that comes after you decide who you are in writing. Peace is not a meadow. Peace is a chess clock. It clicks whether you play or not. I poured cereal, I looked at the empty chair across from me, and felt grief sit there without stealing my fork. Then I locked the door with the sound I have learned to treat as prayer, and I walked outside to stand under the maple and say aloud the sentence I had written into law and branch and skin.
"I'm fully capable," I told the tree and the light and the part of me that still doubted it when I was tired, "and I'm not done." The envelope sat on my doormat like a stubborn guest. Certified mail, green card tucked under clear plastic, county seal pressed into the corner as if weight were a kind of respect. I stood with my hand on the knob and felt the maple shadow lean across my back like a hand that knew me before stamps. Inside, the letter used the careful voice of government. Subpoena to testify before the grand jury, date, time, instructions about not discussing proceedings beyond the courthouse door, instructions about elevators, security bins, and the persistent preference of the state for paper clips over staples. My name was spelled correctly. It's a small thing until you've watched men mislabel you as a strategy. I called Marcus on the beige phone because ceremony matters. "Prep at 9, he said. "Ada Hale will meet us. Wear the jacket that makes you look like you file seasons on time." "Peace is a verb," I said. "Today it conjugates," he replied. I left the house smelling like coffee and Murphy oil soap, the scent of a place that learned to forgive. The maple flicked light across the porch in dimes. I locked the door, the sound crisp as a sentence that knows its period. At the DA's office, a receptionist with hair the color of authority handed me a badge and a plastic tray for my dignity. Ada Hale walked me back, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, the look of a man who has stared at bad photocopies long enough to hate toner. He poured coffee. He poured quiet. Then he laid out a map of what truth looks like when it requires oath. "Tell it like you told the judge," he said. "The car, the blue tabs, the P.O. box, the midnight chainsaw. You don't have to improvise. You're not auditioning for credibility. You already have it." "What about my son?" I asked. "We're talking to him," Hale said. "He has counsel. There are different roads to accountability. Some are paved with cooperation. I don't need you to make a recommendation. I need you to tell what happened." "What if what happened has feelings?" I asked. "Then we note them," he said, "like weather. We don't let them fly the plane." Grand jury rooms have the spare hospitality of dentist waiting areas. 12 faces, attentive, tired, some making a morning of civic duty, some making rent on an hourly wage. A court reporter with wrists of faith. A stenograph that sounded like rain trying to be Morse code. I raised my right hand. I said yes in the way that makes paper move. Hale walked me through it, clean as folding. I signed a durable power of attorney in a car with the engine running, no notary. He displayed the page with a stamp that did not belong and let the jurors see the spacing lie. A forwarding order moved my mail to a P.O. box rented by my son's wife. He played the body cam clip at 1:30 in the morning, the chainsaw quieted by ordinance, a city arborist reading our covenant like law. He asked about the joint statement, the sentence that put fully capable where it should have been all along, and I said the words out loud, pleased to hear them behave. Then he asked the question that turns the state toward mercy when it remembers how. "What happened next?" he said. "We made a clinic," I said. "Not in law, in a room. Pens, checklists, lasagna. We taught no. We taught record. We taught what help sounds like when it isn't theft. My son sat in the back." One juror, a woman with a high bun and the steady eyes of someone who has moved through storms carrying groceries, leaned forward. "Why did you say yes in the car?" she asked, not unkind. "The first one, the blue tabs." "Because I believed motherhood was a kind of guarantee, and because exhaustion enjoys a pen." The room took that in, the way good rooms do, without commentary, with math.
When it was over, Hale walked me to the hallway where the air is ordinary again. He shook my hand like a colleague and then, just briefly, like a person whose job asks him to carry other people's days. "Thank you," he said. "You didn't editorialize, you didn't apologize. Jurors like that." "Will there be charges?" I asked. "There are going to be documents with teeth," he said, which is the closest a man with a badge comes to poetry before lunch. Outside, late morning made the courthouse steps look like a staircase to a quieter city. Maya was across the street with a notebook down and her hands in her coat like pockets could be manners. She didn't cross, she nodded. I nodded back. That's the contract. I don't take your name until you hand it to me. I don't hand it to you until I'm ready to hear it out loud. Daniel called while I waited for the elevator. "They want me to do a proffer," he said, the word wobbling like a toddler in new shoes. "A queen for a day talk. I tell them everything. They promise not to use it against me unless I lie. Pruitt says it's the right move. It feels like betrayal," I asked. He didn't answer for a moment. "I'm tired of failing out loud," he said. "Then tell the truth," I said. "It's quieter." Back at the house, I found the attic because grief sends you up ladders. In a cardboard banker's box Miguel had labeled with a joke, "Taxes and Treasures," I found a ledger with columns ruled in pencil, his blocky hand setting down numbers like fence posts. Receipts for neighbors' roofs and water heaters he'd spotted and never collected. A tab marked maple with the cost of a sapling and a bag of mulch. He had drawn a small star next to the line that read, "Ruth will hate this expense until shade." In the back, a folded page I hadn't seen, a list titled, "If I Don't Get There First." His handwriting was steady, even when it talked about missing. Call Liv. Check the valve in the basement. Tell Ruth it's okay to be wrong once she's right. I sat on the attic floor and let a few tears do their lawful work. People speak about closure like a door you slam. It isn't. It's a hinge that learned sap.
The rest of the week moved in beats. The consent order landed on the docket like a book finding its shelf. Pruitt emailed proof of the clinic stipend set to auto-transfer each month, the way generosity becomes furniture if you allow it. Wren sent a scanned copy of my letter of wishes and a sticky note. Judge Shepard would approve this grammar. The city arborist scheduled a second walkthrough after the storm to admire the root barrier and make small talk with the soil. Maya called to say the AG's office had opened a broader look at Garrick's fund. She used the word pattern, the way journalists do when they're trying to save readers time they do not have. 3 sets of parents were one forged stamp away from mine. A widow had been helped into a reverse mortgage she didn't understand, then harvested for fees. A man with a bad hip had his car sold to a nephew while he took a nap. Paper everywhere. "You want on the record?" she asked. "Name, photo, the sentence you'll still like in 2 years." I stared at the maple through the kitchen window. The branch that tapped the glass at night looked like a teacher. "Yes," I said, "but I want the sentence first." "Yours," she said. I wrote it at the table with Miguel's ledger open to the page where he'd starred shade. "Help is consent with a receipt. Everything else needs the law." I emailed it. Maya replied with a heart she probably sends to sources exactly twice a year. That night I heard the tapping again. Leaf to glass. "Hello," it said. I pressed my palm against the window and set it back. The house creaked like a rib remembering it's not a cage. The porch light made its small, dutiful halo. I slept without dreaming of stamps. The deposition carousel turned again, this time with Garrick on the pole horse. Marcus let me sit in the back with headphones and a legal pad so I could remember that men who sound confident still need verbs. Garrick wore a suit that needed to be introduced to humility. The ADA sat in the corner like a sentence waiting its turn. The court reporter's keys ratcheted a new weather. "Who hired the midnight arborists?" Marcus asked. "No one," Garrick said, smile in a straight line. "They misunderstood." "Who paid the deposit?" Ada Hale asked from the corner, mild as milk. "I don't recall." Marcus slid a bank receipt across the table with more grace than mercy. "This is your Venmo to Trevor Tree Services for $500. Memo, night job." Garrick blinked, slow. "That must be a mistake." "The kind of mistake that knocks on doors," Marcus said. Later, when the room emptied of cologne and posture, I watched Daniel approach the ADA the way a man approaches baptism water, with hope and dread and a belief that maybe drowning is not the only end. They went into a small room and closed the door. I walked the hallway and counted ceiling tiles. The maple outside memorized the faces leaving the building. "Proffer went," Pruitt texted Marcus an hour later. "No promises, but he's not lying to us today." Back at Maplewood, the clinic ran itself. Know Your Papers night had learned to be a habit. We added a segment called Scams of the Month, curated by Chanel with the zeal of a librarian protecting children from bad books. We laminated a 1-page sheet titled The Short No and passed it out with pens. Maya sat in the back sometimes and left without taking a single quote. Daniel stacked chairs and remembered not to talk. Ron stopped by the next session, sat through the whole hour, then lingered afterward with a different backbone. "I printed things because I thought ink makes reality," he said, eyes on the laminated sheet. "Turns out law does." "You can learn," I said, and he nodded like a man who had finally located the beginning. One afternoon, Liv called to ask for my signature on a card I hope I never use, the one that authorizes her to authorize someone else to authorize the bank to do what I want when nerves make hands shake. "Redundancy is compassionate," she said. I signed. I put it behind Miguel's starred shade. Carr surfaced once more for a gasp of air in the form of a letter scolding us for media narratives. Marcus replied with 2 sentences that a poet could parse for meter. "Your client signed a consent order. We are in performance, not theater." Carr disappeared again like a man who has discovered an elevator that only goes down. The grand jury reconvened a week later. Hale asked me to wait in the hall because this time my name wasn't on the witness list.
I sat on a bench that had seen more confessions than pews and watched a teenager teach his grandmother how to mute her phone. Marcus sent me a text with a period at the end. Bills voted, filing tomorrow. I closed my eyes and pictured the clerk stamping red on stark white, the way a city tattoos the truth when it finally learns it. Maya's on-record piece ran that weekend. My name in print felt less like exposure than like a document going where it belongs. She used my sentence, but she bracketed it with other people's lives. A widow, a man with a hip, a daughter who stopped a sale because she saw her mother in a headline. The comments were the internet at its best and worst. I didn't read them. Jess did. She read me the ones that were maps. Thank you. Me too. I didn't sign the thing in the car. Lena sent a voicemail I listened to with my finger on the stop button and left it there the entire time. I gave the AG everything, she said. Texts, the chat where Garrick said the thing about night workers, my part, the P.O. box. I'm not asking for absolution. I am telling you I did the next right thing, and the next. I will keep doing it. I saved it. I didn't call back. Mercy as conditions and a calendar. I am learning.
At the end of the month, Ren emailed a statement. Stipend funded, clinic transfer received, trust balance neat and quiet. Attached was a scan of my letter of wishes with a yellow highlight I hadn't put there, and a small note. Your last line is my favorite. No one may cut down the tree for convenience. Liv sent a photo of the trust account on a screen that looked like a green field. Janelle framed the joint statement and hung it in the lounge at an angle that made everyone straighten it when they walked by. A small domestic penance. On a Tuesday people will forget, Hale stood at a podium and read counts into a microphone that made law sound like nutrition labels. Forgery of notarial act. Attempted interference with public property. Conspiracy. Elder financial abuse. The names were not mine. Garrick's suit looked worse on television than in person. Carr's cologne did not translate to audio. The paralegal cried in a way that did not beg you to feel sorry. It begged you to understand amateurs run the most dangerous errands for professionals. That afternoon, Daniel stood on my porch with a screwdriver, uninvited. He held it up like a passport. Hinge squeaks, he said. It does, I said, and let him in. He worked in quiet. Oil, wipe, test, the small mechanics of repair. When he was done, he stood in the doorway the way you stand when the room belongs to someone else and you're waiting for customs. I told them everything, he said. Not to save me, to stop it. Pruitt says I may get diversion. Classes, restitution, long probation. No record if I behave. Behave, I said, because sometimes your vocabulary doesn't need an upgrade. He looked at the maple. I didn't know what it meant to keep anything alive, he said. I thought money was breath. Turns out it's just oxygen. The body has to do the rest. You're learning, I said. He lifted a grocery bag from the floor and set it on the counter. Dinner, he said. Lasagna. I read your notes. I followed the recipe card. I didn't skip the cinnamon. We ate in a kitchen that remembered our elbows. He washed, I dried. He told me boring work stories in boring detail, which is the math of getting to stay. When he left, he hugged me the way a man shakes a hand. Brief, firm, no plea hidden in the grip. He stood on the porch and looked like a boy who had finally put away the cape he could not fly in. Someday, the house, he said, if I graduate. If you graduate, I said. You'll know where the napkins go. When he was gone, I stood under the maple until the porch light made a circle around us both. The branch tapped the window twice like applause stolen from a much larger room. Hello, it said. Continue. Inside, I took Miguel's ledger out of the attic box and left it on the kitchen table. I wrote on the back page, under his starred shade, fully capable was true. Then I added a quieter line I would not have known how to write 10 chapters ago. Mercy is a contract you sign after the receipts are counted. I made tea and placed 1 cup by the photograph on the corkboard, Daniel at 10 and the dog believing in frisbees, and 1 by the joint statement framed on the wall. I turned off the lamp and listened to the housework. Pipes, wind, the click of a key against leather. The law of living row by row, sentence by sentence, until the page actually belongs to you. The letter from the district attorney didn't dress itself up.
No ribbon, no italics, just a single page asking if I wished to submit a victim impact statement for the arraignment and plea calendar next month. The form attached offered boxes where grief could be made legible: financial loss, emotional harm, recommendations. There was even a line that said, "Do you wish to be heard in court?" as if voices could be scheduled like oil changes. I set it on the kitchen table beside Miguel's ledger, and the morning sun made a rectangle of clarity across both. The maple outside shook a coin purse of light. I boiled water, rinsed the teapot the way my mother taught me, and told myself the truth. I didn't want to sharpen my pain into a spear. I wanted to write down what I intended to keep. "Write it like a grocery list," Evelyn said when I called, because she has learned that food is a metaphor only when you've eaten. Not for what's missing, for what you buy when you're being good to yourself. I tried. It came out sounding like law in one paragraph, and like prayer in the next, and like a woman telling a boy he cannot live here anymore in the third. I started again. The third time took. "Your Honor," I wrote, "the harm here isn't that my son opened my mail, or that a midnight chainsaw came to my curb. It's that men tried to relabel my name. I ask the court to insist on verbs that return me to myself: restore, record, repay. I don't want them jailed for my satisfaction. I want them too busy fixing what other people call help to do this again. Order a sentence that includes boring work: restitution, community education, standing orders not to touch trees or mothers without consent. Make fully capable a line they learn to read out loud." I showed the draft to Marcus in the lounge at Maplewood, the page lying between us like a truce we both wanted to hold. He read with his lawyer's pencil idle for once. "It sounds like you," he said. "That's the only standard that is ever held in a courtroom." "Do judges like groceries?" I asked. "Judges like sentences that know where to end," he said. "This one does." We walked it down to Janelle's copier like it was a child we were teaching to cross the street. She made 2 sets, stapled neatly, slid one into a manila envelope with the address already typed. At the bottom of my copy, I wrote a line that wasn't for the judge, and wasn't for the file, and wasn't really for me. Signed in a kitchen that remembers my elbows. Quiet, suddenly, decided to be a morning habit. The beige phone blinked less. The clinic ran itself on Wednesdays. Jess created a laminated checklist with small boxes that made refusal look like progress. We added a new slide to Janelle's talk called "How Not to Accidentally Steal," and watched men take notes with the solemnity of people signing up to be deputies in an old movie. Daniel came every week and sat in the back. He didn't speak, he stacked chairs, he learned everyone's coffee order and got it wrong exactly once. He wore work clothes that carried a little drywall dust at the cuffs. Real jobs leave tracks. He stopped texting me at midnight and started sending photographs of squeaky hinges he'd oiled in apartments that did not belong to him. "He's learning to be background," Evelyn said, approving. "That's a graduate-level course." On a Thursday afternoon that smelled like rain and overcooked coffee, a letter from the union arrived with a logo that still made my heart stand up straight. "We recently discovered unclaimed benefits owed to the spouse of Miguel Alvarez." It read like an apology a ledger had learned to say. A small pension he had never drawn down, plus a death benefit the union clerk had failed to chase me for in the months when people brought casseroles and forgot to check signatures. I took the letter to Wren at the bank because she files money with dignity. She read it once, smiled the small smile of a woman who has put a bow on a lot of widows, and drafted the simplest of plans. "Half to you," she said, "half to the clinic endowment. Call it Miguel's overtime." We opened a new sub-account with a nickname that would never make it onto an IRS form, Shade Fund, and I pictured Miguel's star next to the word again, pencil marks insisting on sunlight. Quiet, suddenly, decided to be a morning habit. The beige phone blinked less. The clinic ran itself on Wednesdays. Jess created a laminated checklist with small boxes that made refusal look like progress. We added a new slide to Janelle's talk called "How Not to Accidentally Steal," and watched men take notes with the solemnity of people signing up to be deputies in an old movie. Daniel came every week and sat in the back. He didn't speak, he stacked chairs, he learned everyone's coffee order and got it wrong exactly once.
He wore work clothes that carried a little drywall dust at the cuffs. Real jobs leave tracks. He stopped texting me at midnight and started sending photographs of squeaky hinges he'd oiled in apartments that did not belong to him. "He's learning to be background," Evelyn said, approving. "That's a graduate-level course." On a Thursday afternoon that smelled like rain and overcooked coffee, a letter from the union arrived with a logo that still made my heart stand up straight. "We recently discovered unclaimed benefits owed to the spouse of Miguel Alvarez." It read like an apology a ledger had learned to say. A small pension he had never drawn down, plus a death benefit the union clerk had failed to chase me for in the months when people brought casseroles and forgot to check signatures. I took the letter to Ren at the bank because she files money with dignity. She read it once, smiled the small smile of a woman who has put a bow on a lot of widows, and drafted the simplest of plans. "Half to you," she said, "half to the clinic endowment. Call it Miguel's overtime." We opened a new sub-account with a nickname that would never make it onto an IRS form, Shade Fund, and I pictured Miguel's star next to the word again, pencil marks insisting on sunlight.
Storm season announced itself at 3 in the morning with a sound I've always thought of as God rearranging furniture. Wind shouldered the house. Rain braided itself into seriousness. The maple moved with the old grace, doing the math of stress and surrender. Around 4:30, there was a noise that made sleep sit up, a wet crack. Not the scream of a trunk, not the end of a life, just a limb letting go like a sentence finally allowed its period. In daylight, the branch lay across the grass like a sleeping animal, leaves still glossy, edges raw. The city arborist came with her ponytail and her boots and her clipboard. She walked the drip line, pressed her ear to bark, then nodded. "She dropped weight the smart way," she said. "We'll take this piece. We'll deadwood that side. She'll heal." "I want the wood," I blurted, and the arborist grinned the grin of a woman who has watched fathers snatch toys from curbs. "Keep it," she said. "Make it into something that remembers." Jess knew just the person who could coax a story out of a limb. Her friend Mateo, a furniture apprentice who worked in a shop that smelled like cedar and ambition. He picked up the wood with reverence, ran his hand over the grain the way men touch a toddler's hair, and said, "I can make you a bench, something you sit on when you don't want to be brave but are anyway." He brought the bench back a week later, smooth as good grammar, oil bringing out the river in the wood. On the underside, burned into the maple with a patient hand, he'd written our private clause: "No midnight arborists." I placed the bench under the canopy where the limb had fallen. People sit and confess themselves to wood. Don't let anyone tell you different. The arraignment hearing came on a Tuesday with bad fluorescent light and better acoustics than many churches. Garrick pled not guilty, his lawyer saying words like misunderstanding with a straight face I almost admired. The paralegal looked like relief had taken off her shoes. Carr stood at the back with a necktie that had learned to be humble. I sat on a bench with Marcus and Ada Hale and watched the choreography of the state remove its hat. When the court called for victim statements, I walked to the lectern in the jacket Evelyn says makes me look like I know where the napkins go. I read my page. I did not look at anyone who needed me to. I spoke the way you speak to a room that has to choose its verbs carefully, slowly with the hard consonants intact. The judge listened in that still way justice has when it isn't busy with theater. "Thank you, Miss Alvarez," she said when I finished. "Your requests are noted." Later, outside the courthouse, Maya asked me what it felt like to read the thing. She didn't have her notebook out. "Like installing a lock," I said, "on a door that used to stay shut only because I leaned on it." Ron decided to host a block party as penance for the Sharpie bylaws. He applied for a permit the correct way, with fees and cones and a smile that made the clerk stamp something without suspicion. Mrs. Klein designed a flyer that used the word neighbor without quotation marks. Kara brought balloons that looked like apologies you could pop. The city arborist came in street clothes and admired the bench with her hand like a midwife. Jess controlled a playlist that made even stiff hips consider themselves invited. I brought lemonade and a stack of clinic checklists because this is who I am now, apparently, a woman who travels with pens.
Daniel manned the grill next to a lanky teenager with an undercut who called him Mr. A. He did not burn the hot dogs. He asked people whether they wanted onions the way men ask permission when they're trying to understand a new language. He caught my eye once across a table piled with paper plates and made the smallest gesture a body can make and still mean it, a nod that contains both apology and intention.
The AG's office sent a press release the next day with more counts and more names than fit in a paragraph. Maya's headline used the word pattern again. The comments tried to turn it into a political argument and then, miraculously, did not. I did not read them. Jess did. She sent me the ones that were maps. My mother sighed in the car. Not anymore. I moved my deed out of the glove compartment, fully capable of saying no. 2 days later, a county assessor stood on my porch with a clipboard and the expression of a man who likes widgets balanced. Primary residence? He asked. Homestead credit? Primary, I said. Homestead. He ticked boxes that made numbers behave. Before he left, he admired the bench without touching it, like a man worried about policy. We lost a maple once, he said. Storm took it. My wife cried like a wedding. I didn't understand until summer. We built ours into furniture, I said. Grief sits easier when it has somewhere to sit. After dinner, the beige phone blinked with a message from Wren confirming a wire from the union had landed clean. The number wasn't the point. The action was. We funded the Shade Fund and a new line item at the clinic called Miguel's Overtime, earmarked for notarization clinics and recorder's office runs for women who don't drive at night. Janelle printed a certificate on thick paper because dignity requires cardstock, and put it on the bulletin board next to the blue flyer with Nine Eyes' photo. The line at the bottom made my eyes hot. In gratitude for the shade we live under. Marcus pretended to cough until he stopped needing to. On a Wednesday, Daniel knocked at my door with a box under his arm. From the storage unit, he said, sheepish in the good way. I found Dad's old cassette deck, thought maybe there were tapes. We sat on the kitchen floor like teenagers who'd been grounded by a roof and sorted through a plastic tub that reality had given up on. There were 4 cassettes with Miguel's handwriting and 2 with Daniel's bubble letters, and one labeled Ruth, Singing Bad, which turned out to be me at 28 murdering a Motown song with such enthusiasm the dead forgave me. One tape had only the word house on it. We fed it into the deck. It clicked, hummed, and then Miguel's voice filled the room like someone biting into an apple. He had recorded the house when we bought it, walkthrough narration for his brother in Fresno who couldn't fly out. You could hear our old refrigerator buzzing like a gossip. You could hear me in the background saying, "That maple looks like a stick." And you could hear our son, Small, asking if we could climb it anyway. We laughed and cried and let the past play out loud. Daniel rewound and pressed record again. For the next owners, he said softly, someday, after graduation. He looked at me and waited, like a man asking permission to breathe. I nodded. He cleared his throat the way his father used to when he was being brave in a small way. This is the house on Maple, he said into 1994 technology. If you're hearing this, you already know that houses are better than pictures. This one has a bench made from a limb that learned to fall right. If you sit there, you'll feel smarter. The kitchen remembers elbows. The pantry hinge doesn't squeak. The tree is not negotiable. If you're smart, you'll learn the names of your neighbors and keep a screwdriver in the top drawer. If you're lucky, someone will teach you to make lasagna with a little cinnamon. We left the tape cued to the beginning and put it into Miguel's ledger, between taxes and treasures and the starred line for shade. Wren would probably tell me paper is not the right place for magnetic tape. Wren can be right tomorrow.
That night, in my room at Maplewood, because I still split the week the way you split bread, fairly, with an eye toward the hungry, I wrote Maya a short email. When you quote me again, if you do, try this. Help is consent with a receipt. Everything else needs the law and a tree. She wrote back, I'll put the tree in the nut graph. We are a nation of specialists. The next morning, Ada Hale called to say the plea talks looked real. Garrick's counsel had discovered cameras they didn't know existed. The Chainsaw Man were cooperating to keep their licenses. Carr's paralegal had found a spine and a lawyer. Your statement will sit in the file in a folder that gets pulled when anyone tries to talk a judge into forgetting what happened, he said. It will live there longer than you or me. Good, I said. May it age better than lasagna. The maple tapped the window that night as if to agree. The bench took the day's weight without complaint. On my corkboard, the joint statement sat next to the photo of Daniel at 10 and the dog with impossible hope. Beneath them, I pinned the assessor's homestead notice, because even bureaucracy can be proof of a life. Before sleep, I wrote a note on an index card and tucked it into the recipe box between sopa de lima and cinnamon toast for bad days. Inventory of quiet. Door locks that sound like prayer. Bench under a tree made of that tree. Sun in the back row with a pen. Ledger with a star for shade. Statement read out loud once and kept forever. Women with clipboards and cookies. A city that learned my name and wrote it right. I turned out the light. The building exhaled. Somewhere, a television applauded someone else's good news. In my pocket, the key made its small, brave sound against leather. The maple wrote soft algebra on the ceiling. I slept like a woman whose sentence had landed where it should and whose house remembered the sound. On the morning I decided to live at the house full-time, Maplewood smelled like toast and endings. Janelle hugged me with the professional tenderness of a woman who knows when to adjust a blanket and when to let you carry your own. She handed me a manila folder, photocopies of everything that now spelled my name correctly, and a Ziploc bag with 2 extra tea bags tucked in, as if bureaucracy requires steeping. You can always come back, she said. Rooms do better when they know they're Plan A, not Plan Z. Evelyn jingled her charm bracelet like a bell that calls ships home. You'll still come for bingo, she said, not asking. For the shouting, I promised, not the numbers. Jess arrived with the Corolla and a back seat full of cardboard that insisted on being useful. Kitchen, linen, maple bench oil, do not drink. Her handwriting a kind of cheerleading. We checked the room that had been mine. The dent in the pillow looked like consent. I left a book on the nightstand open to the page I never finished the night the chainsaw came, because some bookmarks are memorials. At the house, the maple threw coins onto the lawn as if it had been tipping the neighborhood in my absence. The key turned twice, decisive, the way prayer sounds when it grew up into ritual. I stepped into the quiet and felt the floors recognize me. Homes do that. They learn your weight. We made a ceremony out of small things. Jess put the kettle on, because you boil water for beginnings. I taped the consent order, 1 clean copy, inside the hall closet, where other families keep their vacuum. I slid Miguel's ledger back into its drawer, star side up, and slid the cassette labeled House beside it. I opened the pantry and swung the hinge until it sighed in fluent apology.
We ate empanadas at the island and christened the maple bench with our backs. Mateo's burned joke underneath, no midnight arborists, pressed its grin into the wood. Mrs. Klein brought over a pie and a list of the truly good electricians. Ron appeared with an extension cord as penance and left it like a dog dropping a ball, hopeful. Mid-afternoon brought an unexpected visitor, a man in a navy sport coat with a notary seal on his keychain. He stood on the porch like a person who had learned to ask permission. "Miss Alvarez," he said, "I'm McKenna, the notary whose stamp showed up on your POA." His face held the particular fatigue of someone whose name took a trip without him. He offered a folder without the reflex to keep it. Inside, a copy of his complaint to the Secretary of State, a scan of his journal page for the day in question, my name not there, and a letter he'd written me that wasn't for a court. "I wanted to look you in the eye," he said, "and say, I'm sorry my stamp helped a bad story pretend to be real. I poured tea because tea is what you do when apology arrives dressed correctly." He took it like a man who doesn't drink tea but remembers how to behave. We sat at the bench. He glanced up into the branches with the reverence of someone who has recently learned the difference between paper and wood. "I thought my work was boring," he said. "Witnesses, signatures, dates. I didn't know boring was the backbone." "It is," I said. "Boredom is a skill." He smiled, then did something I didn't expect. He took his old seal out of his pocket and set it on the table between us, like a talisman. "Retired it last week," he said.
I kept it long enough to apologize where it traveled without me. If you want it, throw it away, burn it, use it as a paperweight. I'd like it to live somewhere that remembers why it exists. I ran my thumb over the dented brass and felt absurdly grateful to the object in the way you thank a fork that didn't stab anyone. "We'll give it a job," I said. "The clinic needs show and tell." As if summoned by lesson plans, Marcus called. "Two things," he said, "legal even when polite. Plea talks are real. And the state senator on the Judiciary Committee read Maya's pieces. There's a hearing next month. Elder financial abuse, notarial reforms, title fraud. They want witnesses who speak in sentences people can keep. You're top of the list." "Do they have microphones?" I asked. "They do." "Then yes," I said, "but only if the placard in front of me says my name right." "It will," he said. "I will steal the Sharpie if necessary." As evening tugged at the corners of the light, Daniel texted a photograph. A certificate with county letterhead and boring fonts. Orientation completed. Diversion program, and a date. Underneath, his message, "Small steps. Cinnamon next time." I typed back, "Bring bread. We'll ruin the kitchen." At dusk, the doorbell rang the way a doorbell means neighbor, not trouble. A woman with quick eyes and a careful smile stood there, holding a plant with instructions tied to the stem. "I'm Carmen," she said, "2 blocks over. My mother sent me to meet the lady with the tree." "You found her," I said. She glanced at the bench and grinned when she saw the joke. "Can I bring my Tia on Wednesday? She's raising my cousin's twins and the bank keeps calling." We scheduled her for Know Your Papers night, with the same satisfaction you file taxes early. When she left, the porch felt like a foyer, not a stage. Night in the house is 2 shows at once. The memory lining its ceilings, and the city whispering down the street. At 2 a.m., I woke to the gentle brush at the kitchen window. The limb tapped the glass like a friend who knows better than to ring. Leaf to pane. "Hello." I pressed my palm to the square and matched it, hand to green. We stayed like that until my breath remembered the slower version.
Morning brought rain and a letter from Wren with a checkbox list like a lullaby. Trust funded. Shade fund posted. Clinic transfer sent. Homestead filed and accepted. At the bottom, a doodled maple leaf that looked like a banker having too much fun. She is allowed. By noon, the house had visitors that smelled like sawdust and competence. Mateo and his mentor arrived with a plank of the same maple limb and a small box they'd made out of the offcuts, finger-jointed, oiled to a soft sheen, lid that closes with a whisper. "For the cassette," he said, shy. "Houses like keeping their stories in wood." We slid the tape in. The box made a sound like agreement. After lunch, Liv called to insist on bringing me a debit card attached to the trust, as if money would behave better if it saw her face. She stood at my island and made banking sound like gardening. "Your stipend drops this morning, and then each first of the month," she said, tapping her screen. "The clinic gets Miguel's overtime in the middle. Your letter of wishes is scanned and noted. If anyone calls pretending to be you, they'll have to answer a secret question about cinnamon." "Good," I said. "I forget everything except that." Late afternoon turned the house back into a diner. Maya at the counter with her notebook closed for once. Ada Hale in the doorway only as a person, not a badge. Jess hooking up a lamp in the front room that had never liked lamps. We talked about the hearing in the Capitol like sensible people planning a trip to visit a relative who steals silverware. 30 seconds can do a lot, Maya said, if you make the right noun the subject. "I have a sentence," I said. "I want to test its legs." "Read it," Hale said, which is the most generous thing a prosecutor ever says to a civilian. I read, "Help is consent with a receipt. Everything else needs the law. Stop letting cars be notaries. Stop letting houses be collateral for men's bad weekends. Make fully capable the default assumption until a doctor, not a nephew, says otherwise." The room did what rooms do when language finally fits. A tiny exhale you can shelve books on. When they left, the quiet returned, smarter, less shy. I pulled down the recipe card for lasagna and fished the cinnamon from the cabinet. The doorbell rang, and Daniel stood there with bread, sleeves rolled, broom in hand like a passport.
He didn't ask to come in. His body remembered to wait. "It's raining," he said, "because sometimes men need to be obvious while they locate more useful sentences." "Stoveworks," I said, holding the door. We cooked like truce. He chopped, I stirred. He told me about diversion class like it was weather. Attendance required, apologies rehearsed, a volunteer with a voice like his grandmother explaining restitution as arithmetic and not penance. When the sauce began to smell like a house forgiving you on purpose, he reached for the cinnamon and waited. "Your hand," I said, and let him shake. A dust, not a dump. He grinned and then looked embarrassed for grinning. The boy at 10 flashed in the man like a fish. While the pasta rested, he stood over the sink with Miguel's tape player, coaxing new batteries into old patients. He pressed play and let the old house speak through the small speaker. The crunchy plosive of 1994 plastic, Miguel's voice giving a tour of our life to a brother who didn't make it east. Daniel set the player on the table like a radio that captured a weather system, and for a long minute we listened to a man we loved turn corners that still exist. He nodded toward the new box Mateo made. "Can I?" he asked. "You can," I said. He slid the cassette in, closed the lid, and ran his palm across the grain the way a person thanks a dog that stayed. Then he washed the pan without being asked. Then he dried it. Then he put it away in the right drawer, not as performance, but because he remembered where I kept my endings. After he left, the house breathed. I walked the rooms with the soft officiousness of a night watchman, doors latched, windows latched, rain traveling down gutters like a plan. In the hallway, I stopped at the closet and opened it to the consent order, my private liturgy. Stamped blue, indexing number. The county's clean block letters making grammar out of what once felt like begging. The porch light clicked on with that small, dutiful circle it draws on the world. The maple nodded in weather I could accept. The bench took the sound of rain and made it feel like company. Before bed, I opened the folder from the DA with the line where I'd checked yes to "Do you wish to be heard in court?" I slid it behind the joint statement on my corkboard and pinned over both a scrap of paper with a diner script reminder I'd started living by. Inventory the quiet. Protect the nouns. The beige phone blinked once. A message from Wren. Your shade fund bought 20 notarizations and 10 cab rides to the recorder's office this week. Janelle cried. Another from McKenna the notary. If you want, I'll teach at the clinic how to spot a forgery before it learns to walk. And one from an unknown number that turned out not to be unknown at all. Lena, voice trying for study. I paid my part. I'm working 2 jobs. I told the AG everything that stays true after sleep. If you need extra lasagna pans for clinic night, text me. I forwarded the first 2 to Jess with 3 exclamation points I didn't apologize for, and saved the third. Mercy is a calendar and a checklist. It also keeps spare pans in the basement. When I lay down, the ceiling wrote maple algebra in the dark. The keys on the dresser made their small, brave sound. In the quiet, a sentence I'd been carrying all day climbed into the space beside my ribs and settled there like a cat that finally trusts your breathing. I am not returning to a house. I am finishing a sentence. Outside, rain practiced forgiveness on concrete. Inside, a woman who had learned to be fully capable without quotation marks slept in a room that remembered her elbows. Under a roof that would, in the morning, ask her again to choose between quiet and fight. I have found the answer that allows both. Tomorrow, there would be a hearing date in a calendar and a train ticket to the Capitol, a revised slide for how not to accidentally steal, a fresh roll of pater's tape for our new sign on clinic night. Cars are not notaries. Tomorrow, there might be a neighbor at the bench who needed to risk a sentence out loud. Tomorrow, there would be cinnamon on a grocery list and a leaf tapping the window for attendance. Tonight, there was only the lock turning the way prayer does after a long lesson, and the maple keeping vigil, as if it had been appointed to teach me the rest of the book.